What's up world? It's Willy What If here with another new video. This is part 2 of What If Naruto was adopted by Iruka Sensei. I saw a few comments asking to bring this back, so let me know if you want to see more. Part 2. Time seemed to race by in the aftermath of the Uchiha clan massacre. Naruto and his friends all had goals to work towards. Sasuke sought revenge for his clan, Hinata worked for recognition from her father, and Naruto continued to seek the post of Hokage. All three knew what it would take to accomplish their dreams, and each was willing to sacrifice to help the others obtain theirs. With this mindset they trained, honing their skills on one another throughout their years at the academy. Almost 3 years had passed since the group had been reunited. Each of them had mastered the 3 required jutsu, except Naruto. He had long since given up on the Bunshin no Jutsu after Iruka insisted that the Kage Bunshin technique would be more than sufficient to pass the final exams. Following their successes in ninjutsu, the group took it upon themselves to learn more. Hinata had been taught of elemental jutsus by her father at the Hyuga estate, sharing the information with her companions. Sasuke, of course, seemed to have a knack for fire techniques, having already mastered one of them at a young age. The other two didn't know what affinity they possessed, so simply learning simple techniques was the only way to go about it. Over the course of time each of them picked up additional jutsus. Naruto had the most difficult time with this, learning 2 basic survival techniques to the 3 or 4 his friends accomplished. They were both wind-based, one erased sense while the other got rid of tracks. Sasuke naturally picked up the jutsus for lighting fires and self-heating for cold climates. However, to their surprise he also learned a few lightning-style techniques with relative ease. His pride was kept in check by his own advice, however, noting that the abilities they were learning were all non-combat and their usefulness extended only so far. Hinata struggled with the elemental jutsus, although not to the same extent Naruto had. She chose, by elimination more or less, to master the water-based jutsus, and after much painstaking practice she finally managed it. She was, however, the only one of their group besides Sasuke that was able to pick up an offensive technique, an earth-style ability that ruptured the ground around a target, preventing movement by trapping their feet. It worked surprisingly well in conjunction with Sasuke's fireball. After 3 years it was not difficult to tell which of them had the advantage in taijutsu. Although Sasuke and Hinata's stamina had increased dramatically, neither could match Naruto's endurance. By the time they were all 10 years old he was able to spar them both to exhaustion with energy to spare. The blonde knew that what he lacked in chakra manipulation he would have to make up for with his taijutsu, and as such focused his efforts on more advanced hand-to-hand combat techniques. Training aside, Naruto had branched out from his group and befriended a few other of his classmates. He got along with Shikamaru, Choji, and Kiba fairly well, but despite his best efforts it was hard to get even a nod out of Shino, let alone a conversation. Ino and Sakura seemed to despise him for getting in their way or something, although it seemed the majority of their vehemence was directed at Hinata. In their mind, she was competition for Sasuke, and as the only female the Uchiha spent time with she was a prime target for their spite. Sasuke had no interest in making additional friends or returning the affections of his admirers. Hinata seemed content with her 2 friends, though she was still painfully shy even with them. No amount of interaction or encouragement seemed to help. Naruto was eternally vexed at this, but resolved just to be the best friend he could be in the absence of others. Every time she looked at him a light blush sprang up unbidden, forcing her eyes back to the ground. Iruka had told him that it meant she liked him, and when the boy matter-of-factly stated he liked her too, his teacher had just shaken his head and said it wasn't the same in Appas. Whatever, he would figure it out later. Shortly after Sasuke's 11th birthday, at the beginning of their 5th year, Iruka announced to the class that survival training would commence in September. This week is the 10th training ground, right? Naruto asked between bowls of ramen. It was October 10th, 5 weeks into their survival training program, and they had decided to celebrate Naruto's birthday at Ichiraku's. It was rare that Hinata and Sasuke were with Naruto around so many people, and it was the first time they had been on his birthday. Yes, I think so, Hinata said quietly, staring down at her untouched bowl and looking overtly concerned. The girl had changed her normal outfit from years before, favoring a slightly oversized beige coat and a pair of dark capris. The new attire was not on her mind, however, and neither was the upcoming survival training. As they had taken the day off of training and spent more time in the bustle of the village, the Hyuga heiress had noticed more harsh looks towards Naruto than usual. It had always bothered her, the way they looked at her friend and muttered curses as he passed. But today was different than most days. More than one individual had openly sneered at Naruto, one going so far as to say he was a demon child. Naruto had simply ignored them like always. He said Iruka didn't like him getting upset with those people. But it upset her. And Naruto-kun, she started hesitantly, cursing herself for stuttering. People seem more cruel to you today. I mean, more than they usually are. And what? Hinata trailed off dismally, both depressed for her friend's sake and helpless to come up with a solution. or even a reason why. It's always like that on my birthday, Hinata-chan, he stated matter-of-factly. He failed to notice the furious blush on his friend's face as a result of the added suffix, something he had started doing a year before. In truth, it was not something he thought about much. For whatever reason, the citizens of Konoha expressed greater distaste for Naruto around October 10th. It's not a big deal, he shrugged, slurping down a mouthful of noodles from his miso-flavored ramen. Better to just ignore them anyway, Sasuke grunted, stretching on his stool. Hinata bit her lip, glancing at her dark-haired friend before looking back down at the counter. She had watched Naruto over the years with her Byakugan, noting the steady increase in the red chakra she had first noticed years earlier. The more she considered it, the further convinced she was that it was the source of her friend's travails. Sasuke shared her concerns in a way, but he didn't seem concerned about getting to the bottom of it. As far as he was concerned, if it made Naruto a stronger person, the villagers' attitudes might even be considered a boon. But Hinata could see it, even if Sasuke refused to. In the same way that Sasuke had hardened a mask of apathy over the years, Naruto had created one of nonchalance and humor. She admired Naruto in the fact that, despite adversity, he put on a brave face day after day and tried his hardest, no matter what. If only she could be so brave. I'll meet you both at the park. I have something to take care of. And quat. With a rushed bow to Ichiraku's owner, Tucci, she rushed off into the busy streets, a few coins left by her untouched bowl. Naruto watched after her for a moment before turning back to the counter, looking down at his noodles pensively. He felt uncomfortable, for some reason. Naruto. The chastising tone came from within the shop. Ayame, Tucci's daughter, stalked out of the kitchen with her hands on her hips. What did you do to upset that girl? Her father sighed, waving a hand at her and cutting in before she could continue. Naruto didn't do anything. Ayame. When have you ever known our Naruto to be mean? The kindly middle-aged man smiled at the blonde, who returned his grin appreciatively. True, Dad, but that doesn't mean he knows how to handle a girl's feelings. You'd better be careful, hear me? Her eyes shot daggers at the boy before softening and winking. Ayame liked him almost as much as her father, and the berating she afforded him only proved as much. I'm just kidding, Naruto. Would you and your friend like another bowl on the house? It's your birthday, after all. Sasuke turned her down, though Naruto took up her offer enthusiastically. He would figure out what was up with Hinata later. Hinata had quickly made her way to the library, ducking her head as she passed the front desk to search the archives. She had gone there once or twice for the same purpose, as her family library did not seem to have the information she sought. After a fruitless search in the history section, finding books going back about 10 years, skipping a few, and continuing through antiquity, she timidly approached one of the library's keepers. Anyo. Excuse me, she started, drawing a hard stare before the librarian recognized her and bowed respectfully. Hinata always felt uncomfortable when people's attitudes changed upon realizing her heritage. I can't seem to find any information regarding the end of the Third War, specifically about our village, she began innocently enough, willing her stutter away. There's some vague information about a Kyubi no Kitsune destroying Konoha, but there aren't many details. Are there any records of our village near that time, about 11 years ago? The keeper gave Hinata a long, flat look before responding coolly. That information is classified. Only a shinobi of higher rank than Chunin can access it. I apologize for the inconvenience, Miss. And quat. Another bow signaled the end of the conversation, leaving a confused girl to distress over what it meant. She had accepted that her father had been unable to disclose the information to her, as it appeared Sasuke's had. If the adults could not tell them under any circumstance, that meant it was a law rather than a well-kept secret. But what kind of law demanded that an entire period of Konoha history be kept secret from the public? And what did this have to do with Naruto? Hinata left the library with more questions than when she had arrived, head spinning with possibilities but none of them leading her to an answer. A few days later their class was gathered in the yard outside of the academy, all sporting small packs that only carried camping equipment. Many of the students were buzzing excitedly, while others seemed disinterested or even worried. All right everyone, Iruka said brightly as he strode towards them, clipboard in hand with a small pack of his own. As you know, we're going to be spending 3 days in training ground 10, which is along the eastern outskirts of the village. Unlike out previous survival training, this is a solo exercise, so there will be no teams here. And quat. A collective groan and a few worried glances met his announcement. Now don't worry too much. Myself and Mizuki Sensei will be patrolling the area to make sure nothing happens. Area 10 is about 24 square kilometers of dense forest, but there are no inherent dangers outside of your normal wild animals. And let me make this clear, although we are not setting limited boundaries for you, we expect you to avoid your classmates. If we find that you have been allying with one another to complete the exercise, all offending parties will receiving a failing grade. Am I clear? Everybody nodded. Good. Then follow me ! And quat. 10 minutes later they all stood in front of the entrance to a vast forest, surrounded only with wooden stakes every few dozen meters to mark the training area. Naruto shrugged his shoulders, adjusting his pack as he chatted with Sasuke and Hinata for a few minutes before they were to enter. The majority of it was him talking at them, as per usual. This is going to be fun, he remarked in a bubbly fashion, bouncing on the balls of his feet. I doubt the rest of the class has learned even half the survival techniques we have. This'll be no problem. Sasuke nodded before looking off into the forest, seeming uninterested. Hinata looked worried, and although that was a normal look for her, it seemed a bit more pronounced today. You alright, Hinata-chan? Startled, as if snapped out of a reverie, the girl blushed and nodded quickly, pushing her index fingers together and staring at the ground. Naruto made a face and looked towards Iruka. Alright, half of you will be staying here with me. The rest of you follow Mizuki Sensei to the opposite end of the forest. We've synchronized our watches, so at 9 sharp everybody will enter the forest at once. I expect you all to disperse immediately, understood? A chorus of yes sensei and the silver-haired Chunin, Mizuki, nodded, calling out names to follow him before dashing around the perimeter. Hinata breathed a sigh of relief when she was chosen to follow Mizuki with Naruto. Sasuke afforded them a small smirk as they ran off. It took about 15 minutes to circumvent the forest, but they arrived with 10 minutes to spare until the departure time. The Hyuga girl stood fidgeting next to Naruto, jumping as she felt his hand touch her shoulder. Hey, relax Hinata-chan. I know you'll do great, he said with a big, squinty-eyed smile. Despite her flush, she returned the smile meekly. Naruto had a way of making her feel better, even with so much on her mind. Alright, 30 seconds to go, Mizuki drawled, sounding bored. Remember, no working together. And, he continued, eyes traveling over Naruto and lingering for a moment. Be careful out there. And quat. Hinata bit her lip, but there was no time for questions or comments. The Chunin gave the signal and they were off, darting into the trees and scattering in every direction. Be safe, Naruto-kun. A day had passed uneventfully in the forest. Naruto sat dozing against a tree in his small camp in the approaching twilight, his small tent and the remainder of a fire nearby. He had been forced to start the fire manually using some flint and tinder, something Sasuke would never have to do. But he had managed, and after catching a rabbit for dinner and doing some exploring he had quickly fallen asleep. Survival training was pretty boring, after all. A light rustling nearby roused him immediately, instincts kicking in as he stood into a crouch, kunai clutched in one hand. His eyes darted around, trying to find where the noise had come from when a fistful of shuriken streaked towards him from a tree across the small clearing. He rolled to the side, slightly panicked at being attacked. A classmate would not use weapons against him, so who could it be? Naruto had gotten used to death threats, and there had even been a few attempts on his life in the orphanage. But since living with Iruka the attacks had ceased, and now was the first time the boy had felt his life threatened in years. Well, looks like the demon is quick on his feet. And quat. Mizuki dropped from a nearby tree, flanked by 2 shinobi who also wore vests indicating their rank as Chunin. One was a heavy-set, stocky man brandishing a weighty club. The other was a wicked-looking woman that looked to be in her mid-20s. Her weapon of choice was a short, curved sword drawn from a sheath on her back. Mizuki had 2 giant shurikens strapped to his back and was currently spinning a kunai on the index finger of each hand. Naruto could feel their killing intent from where he stood. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Naruto yelled quickly, summoning as many clones as he could manage. 30 clones, all armed with kunai, crouched in front of the oncoming group. 3 Chunin, 1 me, 30 clones to work with. The odds were stacked against him, he knew. The Bunshin were much sturdier than regular clones and could act on their own in a way, but a solid blow would disperse them. Naruto knew that he had trained hard for the last several years, but these were 3 that had been ninjas for longer than he had been alive. They had the advantage of experience, and were likely stronger than him individually. What did I ever do to you? One of the clones growled contemptuously, edging forward slightly. The rest muttered agreement, as if they had all been poised to ask the same thing. The real Naruto waited, watching and worrying. What did you do? Mizuki laughed. It was a cold, hollow sound. Why, you destroyed half the village, killed the 4th Hokage, and murdered countless others, including Iruka Sensei's parents. And quat. Mizuki, the male crony muttered, glancing around nervously. That's against and quat. So? The boy's about to die, he may as well learn of his heritage. And quat. The silver-haired Chunin grinned, eyes flashing in the fading light. Without warning he flung the 2 kunai mid-spin, piercing 4 clones in total. In a fluid motion he had detached one of the monstrous shuriken from his back and flung it hard, and despite efforts to dodge another handful of Bunshin vanished in puffs of smoke. 18 Narutos remained. I'm not a demon, Naruto shouted, letting a fist of shuriken fly followed closely by his kunai. Several of the clones threw their weapons as well. Mizuki dodged most of them without issue, though was forced to deflect several with another kunai. His allies were not as quick, the woman rolling to the side with a gash on one arm, the stocky man growling and pulling a shuriken from his thigh. "Oh yes you are, Naruto-kun." He threw more shuriken, piercing 3 more clones. With only 15 bunshine remaining, Naruto decided he had to act. He tried to ignore Mizuki's taunting as his clones engaged the 2 chunin, leaving his instructor to walk slowly towards him. 11 years ago the Kyubi no Kitsune attacked Konoha. It nearly destroyed everything, and would have if the Yondaime had not sacrificed his life to protect the village. He sealed the demon inside of a newborn, a child born October 10th, 11 years ago. Naruto was desperately trying not to listen, but the words pierced through his concentration. The villagers' murmurs and curses made sense. Damn fox, demon, destroyer. Separately they had not meant much, but together they corroborated Mizuki's taunting. And the red chakra. "Shut up," Naruto shouted, another kunai in his hand as he charged forward. To Mizuki's surprise the boy was not a pushover, forcing him to actively defend himself from a bout of skillful taijutsu interwoven with thrusts and slashes from the kunai. "Hey kid, you're not bad. Too bad you're just too inexperienced." As Naruto thrust forward, burying his blade into the man, he gasped. Mizuki had vanished in a cloud of smoke, a log left in his place, inside of which Naruto's kunai had been lodged. The boy turned, but not fast enough. An intense stab of pain caused him to stagger forward, the oversized shuriken protruding from his back. Too easy. His remaining clones dispersed, though only 3 had lasted that long. The 2 chunin appeared to be panting, not having expected the bunshine to put up such a fight. The furious kunoichi was a little worse for wear, sporting multiple cuts and gashes, whereas her male counterpart had inflicted only minor injuries. "I'm gonna kill this kid," she growled. Now, we have to make this quick or else we'll be discovered," Mizuki droned, bored. "You both get 1 shot each before I finish him. Be sure not to kill him, that privilege is mine alone." Naruto was on his knees, breathing hard. The cage bunshine technique had taken a lot of chakra, more than he had expected. On top of that, he had expended the majority of his projectiles and was losing blood fast. Mizuki approached casually, and though Naruto attempted to struggle to his feet, the man viciously yanked the weapon from his back. He gasped, falling back to the ground and coughing up blood. "Me first," the woman scowled, stepping forward with her sword drawn. With a ruthless thrust the blade pierced through his shoulder near the collarbone, cutting into the bone on its way through his body. Naruto ground his teeth together, trying and failing not to cry out. His scream was interrupted by a fit of coughs, splattering more of his blood on the forest floor. The woman smirked and left the sword in, striding away and looking satisfied. The other chunin approached with little ceremony. Channeling chakra into his club, he swung it hard, catching Naruto in the chest. A sickening crunch seemed to echo around the small clearing. Naruto was launched up and backwards, slamming into a tree and dislocating his shoulder. Before he could fall to the ground, 8 of Mizuki's shuriken pinned his limbs to the tree trunk. "I've been waiting to see this for years, Uzumaki Naruto. Or should I say Kyubi no Kitsune? Either way, it's time to rid you from our village once and for all." A kunai appeared in the man's hand, light from the sinking sun glinting off of the blade menacingly. Naruto was barely conscious. His vision was hazy and marred by blood that had dripped into his eyes. He could hardly even see the kunai that was threatening to finish him off, but he knew it was there. He could hear Mizuki's voice, like an echo coming from far off. But he knew. Can't die. Not yet. Have to help Sasuke, have to. Hokage, Hinata, too. Can't. Doten, earth rupture. A breathless voice yelled from the trees. Mizuki leapt into the air as soon as he recognized the jutsu, snarling as he was forced to backflip away from his prey. His 2 comrades were either caught off guard or too injured to move, because both found their legs trapped in a mixture of earth and rock that had sprung from the ground. Mizuki cast around frantically for the source before glaring back at Naruto. He could at least finish the job before retreating. He fired off 2 kunai at the incapacitated boy. A small form shot from the underbrush, reaching Naruto in a blur of speed and deflecting the 2 projectiles with a kunai. The trapped blonde could not even lift his head to see what was going on. His half-lidded eyes only able to make out the furry hem of a tan jacket and a pair of dark pants, cut off below the knee. Hinata stood in a ready stance directly in front of Naruto, breathing harder than normal and struggling to maintain control of her emotions. With the help of her Byakugan she had watched the scene unfold, cursing her legs for their inability to carry her faster than the dead sprint she had been moving at. She choked back tears. Even without looking she could see her friend's condition clearly. The Hyuga bloodline ability provided nearly 360-degree vision. "I made it. And quat," she breathed, trying desperately to calm herself. She had chosen a location to camp that had been within the maximum range of her Byakugan from Naruto, and although she had felt silly about it at the time she now thanked whatever gods that existed for their aid. "Cute," The demon's girlfriend comes to the rescue. I don't have time for this. And quat. Mizuki grunted, pulling both shuriken from his back and releasing them towards the girl, one after another with the second hovering just below the first. Hinata. And quat. Naruto barely whispered, his collapsed lung working against any attempt to speak. Run. And quat. He coughed weakly, more blood dripping from his lips. Hinata clenched her jaw and pulled out another kunai, shaking her head violently. I won't. It was the most forceful thing the girl had ever said. I won't just let you die. She knew that stopping both massive projectiles would be nearly impossible on her own, but she had to try. If she moved they would strike Naruto head on, ensuring his demise. No, she would stop them. She had to. As the whirling blades approached she channeled as much chakra as she could into her hands, forcing it into the kunai. The blades vibrated violently, not meant to hold chakra, but it was all she had. The first shuriken struck her hard, grinding against the chakra-enhanced blades that were crossed in front of her. She ground her teeth and was forced back a half-meter, and despite the burning in her limbs she let one hand drop. The released pressure brought the spinning weapon centimeters from her neck, held back just barely by a trembling arm. She grunted as the second shuriken impacted, striking at the lowered weapon in front of her torso. It was too much, as expected. Hinata's feet dragged against the dirt, heels forced back until they touched the tree holding Naruto. The second shuriken was already burning into her side, blood splattering backwards. She cried out in pain, and her kunai shattered. Her chakra-infused hands were the only things holding them back now, skin tearing from her palms from the incredible friction. This was it. She was going to die. One last thought flit through her mind as the rotating blades reached her throat. At least I can die with him. And then the pressure was gone. Hinata collapsed at the base of the tree, blue flames flickering from her bleeding palms as she sagged against the base of the tree. Her breath was ragged, but aside from the deep gash in her side she was unharmed. She cast around her enhanced vision quickly, her pounding head making it take a little longer to locate her rescuer. Sasuke-san. And quat. The Uchiha stood several meters to the side, both shuriken spinning in his hands. His eyes were hard on Mizuki, cold and calculating. Hinata had been so focused on stopping the weapons that she had not seen him fly in from the side to snatch the weapons away. Stay with Naruto, Hinata-san. I'll take it from here. And quat. She nodded tiredly, unable to move at the moment even if she had the desire to. Sasuke spread his arms, launching the blades back at their owner with deadly precision. Mizuki was forced to dodge away, the shuriken slicing into the tree he had been standing in. Kaden, great fireball. Instead of aiming at Mizuki, Sasuke had fired the massive flame at the two immobilized ninja who had been struggling to free themselves since being captured moments earlier. A pair of screams rent the air as the fireball passed and dissipated, leaving two scorched, twitching bodies behind. They were not dead, but their burns would effectively take them out of the fight. I get how the Hyuga got here, but how did a brat like you find us? The Chunin asked in an exasperated tone, wrinkling his nose at the smell of scorched flesh. Seeing his comrades taken down did not seem to bother him in the least. I was searching for a water source when I saw you pass by, Sasuke responded evenly, fingers curling into fists. It seemed suspicious that you had two other Chunin with you, so I followed. You shouldn't be so careless. And quat. Whatever, 2 down, 1 to go. Mizuki snarled, landing across the clearing from Sasuke. I was thinking the same thing, Sensei, he said coolly, crouching into a taijutsu stance. I don't know why you want to kill Naruto, but I won't let you lay another finger on him or Hinata-san. And quat. Unwilling to let Mizuki respond, he rushed forward and attacked. I really hate kids, Mizuki grunted after receiving a solid blow to his stomach, returning a kick that brushed Sasuke's chin. For kids, they weren't bad, but they were still kids. He was better than them. He knew it. Doten, earth fist ! And quat. Sasuke grunted as the blow crushed his block and struck his shoulder, sending him careening back into the center of the clearing. He managed to land on his feet, but his arm hung limply at his side and his breathing was labored. Mizuki appeared to be having difficulties breathing now as well, having manipulated his large shuriken several times and fought 2 opponents, on top of being forced to use a more advanced earth-style jutsu. Alright, enough playing. Sit down, kid. Doten, earth rupture. He pushed a palm to the ground, forcing the ground around Sasuke up and capturing a leg before he could leap away. Now stay there and watch. I'm going to kill the demon and your friend now, and then I'll come back to you. And quat. Get back here and fight me, you bastard, Sasuke shouted, striking at the rocks about his leg, struggling to break free. Not again. Not again. Not again. You'll get yours soon. First I'm gonna have some fun with little Miss Hyuga here. And quat. Mizuki's smirk could only be described as evil. He approached Hinata with deliberate slowness, eyeing her up and down. You know, you're pretty well developed for your age. I might actually enjoy this. And quat. He laughed, a sound that chilled the helpless girl to her bones. But she couldn't move. All she could do was glare defiantly at him, pressing herself back against the tree. Naruto's vision was going dark, and the sounds he could hear were muffled. He could see the way Mizuki was looking at Hinata, however, and it made him angry. He held on to the anger as if it were a lifeline, pouring his hate into it. Every shred of scorn and loathing that had built up over the years was suddenly boiling over. His vision gained a red tint, and then everything went dark. Uzumaki Naruto, a voice rumbled in a dull roar, rousing him. Every centimeter of his being felt like it was on fire as he slowly sat up, wondering why everything was so wet. Uzumaki Naruto, the voice came again, louder this time. Why did it sound so familiar? Naruto glanced around as he stood, jaw dropping as he saw the massive gate he had woken in front of. The ceiling of the colossal room disappeared into darkness, as did the rust-colored bars of what appeared to be a prison cell. A large square paper was placed over where the two sides of the gate met, the word seal written plainly on it. Beyond the gate lay complete blackness, save for a pair of giant crimson eyes. The pupils were barely visible slits. Uzumaki Naruto .Unquote. The roar nearly knocked him over, a wave of pure hate washing over him from inside of the cell. Answer me, you damned brat. If you don't do so quickly, you and I are both dead. Unquote. Who? What are you? He asked hesitantly. His head hurt, everything hurt. Where was this? How did he get there? Where's Hinata? And Sasuke? Where are my friends? He was panicking, looking around wildly and all but ignoring the menacing chuckle that shook the room. Fool, you're a hair's breadth from death and you think of your friends. I'd love to talk, but right now you need me or you and your friends will die, which means I die too. Come over here. Unquote. Why should I trust you? Naruto's mind was racing, trying to put everything together. At every turn he was brought back to the only thing that made sense. The demon. This was his demon. Mizuki had been telling the truth. He suddenly felt sick, lurching forward and dry heaving into the shallow water. You don't have a choice, idiot. Look, I'm not trying to escape. I'll work on that later. Right now, we need to live. Now get your imbecilic ass over here before your girlfriend gets gutted, or worse. Unquote. Naruto stiffened, straightening slowly. He had no idea where he was helpless to escape, and the last thing he remembered was Mizuki walking up to Hinata and taking her arm. Was he dead? He shook his head, taking a step forward, then another. Moving was difficult, for some reason. A moment later he was directly in front of the gate, staring into one of the giant irises. A single claw extended from the darkness, reaching slowly through the space between the bars. It hovered a moment less than a meter from him, before plunging straight through his chest. The world spun, and a mad cackle roared in his ears as everything faded away again. Don't die, kid. Unquote. Hinata pulled futilely on the arm Mizuki held, tears leaping to her eyes unbidden. I can't cry. I won't. Naruto-kun wouldn't like that. Naruto-kun. She couldn't help it. A choked sob racked her diminutive form as the sinister Chunin reached for her neck. This was it. She was going to die crying. How pitiful. Father was right. I don't deserve to be the heiress. I don't. She blinked. Mizuki had frozen, hand so close to her neck that he could feel the heat from his palm. Instead of focusing on her, his eyes were bulging, staring at something behind her. And then she felt it, a massive chakra spike unlike anything she had ever experienced. If she had not already been on the ground it would have brought her to her knees. The rocks surrounding Sasuke and the defected Chunin crumbled. Slowly, she turned her head, not trusting the Byakugan to see for her. Hinata's breath caught in her throat. Naruto-kun. And quat. A shroud of red chakra enveloped Naruto, surging around him and spiking at odd angles. The shuriken pinning him to the tree dissolved inside of the malevolent chakra, and Naruto fell to the ground on all fours. He was so close to Hinata that she could hear the bones grinding together as he moved, and she could see his wounds sizzling shut. The chakra was pouring out of him like a fountain, and she could see the strange seal on his torso from where it seemed to come. Frozen in fear, she merely stared at her friend, wide-eyed and unable to speak. Sasuke had fallen to his knees as the wave of killing intent hit him, his eyes locked on Naruto, disbelief painted all across his features. Naruto? ? He could say nothing else. Never had he seen anything like this from his friend, or anyone else for that matter. The power radiating from the blonde was otherworldly. All at once the aura faded, fiery chakra dissipating to leave only a thin veil surrounding Naruto. He was standing tall, staring at Mizuki with his head cocked to the side. His face was contorted in what appeared to be a feral snarl. The nails on his hands had grown to what appeared to be claws, and the whisker-like scars on his face had broadened. But it was his eyes that held the most terror. Naruto's bright blue eyes that always held so much hope and joy were now the color of blood, pupils reduced to vertical slits like that of some demon. Mizuki staggered backwards, falling to the ground with a frightened cry. "It told you. You're a demon. Get away. Get away." He was trying to scramble to his feet and flee. Hinata would never forget the horrid grin that graced her friend's lips at that moment. Neither Sasuke or Hinata had seen him move, but suddenly Naruto was next to Mizuki. With a sickening crunch the Chunin was launched into the air, his ribs crushed with a single kick from the enraged youth. Before he had flown out of reach he was caught, Naruto's claws digging deep into his shoulder and preventing him from moving further away. The bloodthirsty grin did not falter. Mizuki was thrust towards the ground, forming a small crater with the force and fracturing nearly every bone on the left side of his body. Blood spilled from his mouth as broken ribs punctured his lungs. It had all happened so fast that Hinata and Sasuke were barely able to follow it. Now, however, Naruto slowly lifted the broken shinobi into the air by his neck, ignoring the gurgling pleas. He pulled a fist back and chambered it, eyes boring into the barely struggling query. "Any last words?" Naruto snarled, echoing the man's words from minutes earlier. Mizuki's one working eye went wide in terror as the boy smirked again. Naruto's killing intent had not diminished since the strange ability had activated. As a matter of fact, it had increased, and now felt like a heavy blanket of pressure on the whole clearing. "Naruto-kun," Hinata gasped, causing him to falter, crimson eyes traveling slowly to her. "Don't do it, please," she pleaded, almost sobbing. "It's enough. You won. Please, just put him down. We're safe now, please." And what? Her body shook as a fresh wave of sorrow took her. It was too painful to watch. Her best friend, the boy she admired more than anybody, had turned into something he was not. He was ready to kill that man in cold blood even after nearly beating him to death. The battle was won, but Naruto's bloodthirst was palpable. She could see it in his eyes, feel it in the air. This wasn't Naruto. "Please," she cried one last time. Naruto glared at the girl and his face contorted, as if having a sudden emotional conflict. He turned back towards Mizuki and grinned, and for a moment seemed like he was going to strike the finishing blow. But instead the Chunin fell to the ground in a pitiful twitching heap, Naruto's fist falling to his side. Slowly the red glow faded, his nails reverting back to their original state. The last to change were his eyes, shifting from red to blue, then back again several times before finally settling on the familiar aquamarine. And then he was falling. The last thing he remembered was Sasuke running to his side and Hinata calling his name. Then everything got cold, and the world spun into blackness. The first thing he heard sounded like worried whispers which stopped abruptly as his finger twitched. Everything hurt, from the top of his head to the tips of his toes. Breathing was difficult and swallowing felt like drinking fire. There was a foreign pressure near his side and in his palm, but for a time his eyelids felt too heavy to open and check what they were. An uncomfortable light shone from somewhere above him. He was tired. Sleep took him over again. The second time he roused things hurt less, but the pressure was still there. There was no light this time, thankfully. Slowly, painfully, he opened his eyes. Naruto was resting on a hospital bed, with a curtain drawn around him and a window nearby. It was dark outside, but the moonlight let him see that nearly every part of him was wrapped in bandages or in a cast. He tried to move his arm, but quickly found that it was a mistake. A soft gasp escaped him as pain shot up from his fingers to the base of his neck. Something stirred near his other arm, and he glanced down to find the source. Hinata lay asleep in a chair next to him, her head resting near his side, one of her bandaged hands tucked into the cast on his hand. There were dark circles under her eyes and the sheets near her face were wet. He could see bandages through the gash in her coat as well. Naruto watched her for a time, several different emotions vying for his attention before he finally tore his eyes away. Sasuke was there as well, sleeping silently in an armchair near the window. Tears burned as they fell down Naruto's face. His sad smile was only the slightest upward twitch at the corner of his mouth. They're safe. It was the only thought in his mind as he closed his eyes, calm replacing the overwhelming sadness and pain that racked his soul. As long as they were safe, everything was alright. Even if he had killed Mizuki, even if he was a demon, even if he had died, his friends were safe. That comfort carried him back to a fitful slumber, with nightmares of demon eyes haunting him for hours. Ow, Hinata-chan, that hurts. Naruto flinched, though couldn't help but smile. It had been a week since the incident with Mizuki and he was healing fast, already out of his casts and just waiting for the major internal injuries to fully repair. Hinata and Sasuke had returned to classes a few days prior, but rather than train as Naruto insisted, they always came to his room after with Iruka. Sorry, Naruto-kun, she stammered, turning a deep shade of pink and stepping back. It was the first time they had seen him without his casts, and the girl had been overcome with the desire to hug her friend out of a mix of joy and relief at seeing his recovery. She slid back off of the bed to sit, pressing her index fingers together, staring at the floor and looking every bit as embarrassed as she felt. "It's alright, just try not to hug so hard next time," he joked lightly, grinning at Sasuke who was standing near the base of the bed. "How are classes going, glove boy?" And quat. "Very funny," Sasuke remarked dryly, but cracked a smirk despite himself. His forearm was still covered in the plaster cast and held up by a sling. It's not my fault I can't recover freakishly fast from my bones shattering. Classes are boring as always, though just a good amount worse since I can't spar. And quat. He grimaced at his arm before taking a seat and leaning against the wall with a sigh. When did your medic nin say you could be released? The question came from Iruka this time, who had been standing behind Sasuke. He was putting on a brave face like he always did visiting Naruto. In truth, he was riddled with guilt for what had happened to his students. He knew, deep down, that it had not been his fault, but he was responsible for their lives while they were at the academy. He wasn't sure if he would ever forgive himself. Another week at best, Naruto lamented, making a face and throwing his hands in the air, an action he immediately regretted for the spikes of pain it sent through his healing pectorals. He winced and quickly moved his arms back down, grinning foolishly. You had better not try to leave early, Iruka lectured sternly to his sullen charge. It's your responsibility to heal up quickly so you can resume your training. You only have 1 year left after this. And quat. Iruka Sensei, Sasuke interrupted suddenly, causing the three present to turn to him curiously. The boy had become quieter since Itachi's betrayal, but he had been particularly withheld in the last week. His next statement surprised everybody more than the interruption had. Could you give us a few minutes to talk? Iruka blinked, glancing at Naruto for a moment before nodding slowly. Sure, Sasuke, I need to head to a meeting soon anyway. I'll see you two tomorrow, and Naruto, he continued, hesitating at the entrance to the room. Get some rest. Don't keep your friend up too long, you two. And quat. With a smile and a wave he was gone, the door sliding shut behind him. Sasuke stood and drew the curtain around Naruto's bed so that they couldn't be seen from the hallway. He walked slowly back to his chair and sat down heavily, rubbing his temples with his uninjured hand. Naruto, I can't put the question off anymore. And quat. As he started speaking, Naruto averted his gaze opposite both of his friends, mouth turning down into a rare frown. He knew what was coming. It had only been a matter of time. What was that thing? What happened in the woods that day? And quat. The silence rang loudly in their ears for a time as Naruto struggled with a response. Hinata was biting her lip and looking from Sasuke to Naruto, worry etched on her smooth features. Finally he shrugged, another action he regretted immediately. I don't know, he answered in partial honesty, still not meeting either of his friends' eyes. I just got really mad all of a sudden when Mizuki Sensei went for Hinata-chan. It felt like drowning in anger or something. And quat. Mizuki isn't our sensei anymore. And that doesn't explain the red chakra that was leaking out of you, or that insane speed and strength. And your eyes, why were they red? Naruto blinked several times, and it took a moment for him to notice that he was blinking back tears of frustration. I don't remember most of it. I remember going for him, then lifting him up, and then Hinata-chan's voice. After that I blacked out again. And quat. It was an honest answer, even if not what Sasuke was asking. Everything was muddled in his head, but he knew what had happened. Hinata's hand twitched in her lap, like it wanted to move somewhere but lacked the strength or courage. Mizuki called you a demon? Sasuke stated flatly, scowling at him. It's the same thing I've heard the villagers call you. Before last week I just took it as run-of-the-mill insults, but now I'm not so sure. Does this have to do with the secret none of the adults will talk about? And quat. Probably, Naruto said tightly, gritting his teeth. Look, I don't want to talk about it. It's none of your business. And quat. He was glaring at wall still, but there was a frightened look in his eyes that Hinata could barely make out. Sasuke just looked at him hard, considering pushing the topic further. Fine. And quat. Sasuke rose from his chair, pulled back the curtain. I'll see you tomorrow. And quat. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him moments later. Naruto continued his staring contest with the wall, trying not to let a fresh wave of tears have their way. A timid hand touched his and he turned back to Hinata, her eyes shimmering with the same unshed tears. I guess you want to know if I'm a demon too, he spat miserably, hating himself as soon as the words left his mouth. Her hand retreated a small distance and she gave him a look that made him feel like he had just stabbed her. But surprisingly her hand moved back to his, tenderly slipping her fingers past his palm and gripping tightly. I know you're not a demon, Naruto-kun, she said softly, willing her eyes to stay on his. Flashes of the once bloodthirsty spheres played in her vision, but she pushed them away, looking only to the Naruto she knew and cared for. Why, you don't have to tell me about it if you don't want to. But Naruto-kun, she started with more passion than she knew was inside of her, it doesn't matter what happened. We know who you are. Don't let Mizuki's words get to you. And quat. Naruto stared at his friend for a long moment. She had seen him mercilessly bring a man near to his death, ready and willing to strike the final blow. She had looked into his eyes he knew had been wholly demonic and sinister. She had seen, yet still looked past it, still saw Naruto instead of the beast he had become. Iruka's words echoed in his mind as he watched her blush deepen by the second. Those people can't see the real you, Naruto. They can't see past their bias and who they think you are. You are only as good or bad as you decide to be. It's what you decide that matters, not what they think. Thanks, Hinata-chan, he said finally, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. He winced, but still smiled. She turned several shades darker and looked down, causing Naruto to lift an eyebrow and wonder what he had said wrong. After another mistake of a shrug, he leaned back and closed his eyes. He chatted with Hinata about medical jutsus until he dozed off, leaving her to watch him with what might as well be permanently pink cheeks. A week later Naruto was released from the hospital. He had been kept a few days after the medical nins had deemed him dischargeable to ensure he was healed completely. The staff was baffled at the speed at which he healed, though it didn't keep them from giving him nasty looks on the way out. All three had been interrogated by a frightening man named Ibiki, although the evidence was fairly conclusive that the Chunin had been at fault. Everybody seemed curious as to how the battle had ended, so they pinned the victory on the only one of them that had been standing at the end. Sasuke had allegedly finished off Mizuki with an earth-style jutsu that had crushed the man more violently than intended. In the end they were cleared to leave and hoped to never have to encounter the interrogator again. He received a generally warm reception returning to the academy. Even Shino approached him and nodded in acknowledgement. Things returned to normal quickly, with the group falling into their normal routine but with renewed vigor. Although Iruka insisted they had fought incredibly against 3 much higher ranked ninja, they were all determined to improve themselves in light of being beaten. Naruto spent most of his time doing endurance training to further expand his chakra stores, and once or twice sought out Kakashi for information on how to better handle his clones during combat. Before long winter had come and gone, leaving more seasoned 11-year-olds in its wake. Sasuke occasionally brought up Naruto's transformation when they were alone, but eventually stopped asking after the last time the blonde got upset over the issue. He would find out one day, he was sure, and Naruto had given him space when he had needed it. Since the incident Naruto had decided a change in wardrobe was in order. He kept the indigo cloth wrap on his forehead, but he had outgrown most of his t-shirts and shorts by now. Iruka had taken him shopping after he was released from the hospital to pick up new clothes. More often than not Naruto could be seen sporting a dark gray shirt with a thick, black sleeveless coat that reached down to his shins, usually worn open in the front. He kept the cargo shorts, only changing to color to one less bright, varying between black and dark blue. He had been unsure of the change for a few days until he asked Hinata's opinion. For some reason her stammering and blushing was enough confirmation for him. Hinata seemed more and more stressed as their 5th year came to a close, though neither Sasuke nor Naruto could pinpoint why. She never spoke of her personal life or family, so they were both left fairly clueless, not that Sasuke cared much to find out. Naruto, though, fretted over it constantly, finally breaking it to Iruka on the first day of summer. Iruka Sensei, I can't figure out why Hinata-chan is so weird lately. She's more stressed than usual and won't tell me why. She also looks redder than usual but she doesn't have a fever. Iruka had a few guesses, but he allowed Naruto to continue his rant. And I don't know why but it bothers me when she looks upset. I mean it bothers me when Sasuke's upset too, but he's always sorta upset, but still it's not the same. I just want to fix it but I don't know how and quad. Naruto, Iruka started with the smallest of devious smiles. You like Hinata, don't you? Naruto blinked back at him and laughed, like it was a silly question. Of course I do, sensei, we've been friends for 5 years. Quad. No, really listen to the question this time. You like Hinata, don't you? He emphasized the word slowly, carefully. It took much longer than he would have liked, but gradually Naruto's face reddened and he wrinkled his nose. Yep, no way Iruka sensei, she's my best friend. Well, one of my best friends. I can't like my best friend like that. Quad. The idea was absolutely absurd to him. Why not? The unanswerable question had stopped the boy dead in his tracks. He was so adamant about his inability to think about Hinata that way, but had no idea why. Because we're just friends. What does this have to do with Hinata-chan acting weird, sensei? He looked up at Iruka crossly, his face still a bit red. Oh, maybe nothing. Maybe everything, too. I can't say I know, Iruka said mysteriously, giving Naruto a small nudge as he walked past. For some reason Naruto felt even more confused and helpless than before. Why did it matter if he liked Hinata? Not that he did, they were just friends. But he sighed. Just another thing to think about. Maybe an answer would come during the summer sometime. It didn't. Yes, Hokage-sama. The Kyuubi's chakra was sensed nearly 50 kilometers away from the point of origin, although it seemed to be a small flux. To avoid panic a statement was released indicating that we were testing a powerful jutsu in training ground 10 that day. Ibiki's interrogation of the offending Chunin revealed that they had attacked and provoked Uzumaki Naruto and his classmates. It is also clear that Mizuki told the boy of his role as the Kyuubi's vessel, though it is unclear whether or not the other 2 children were present for the explanation. By their accounts it seems unlikely. Quad. Thank you for the report. You are dismissed. Quad. The messenger bowed respectfully before departing, leaving the Sandaime and Iruka alone in the office once again. It had been 3 days since the attempt on Naruto's life, as well as the lives of his friends. "How is he doing?" he asked tiredly, setting his signature pipe down with a sigh. "He's recovering fast, thankfully. He's always seemed to heal from his injuries quickly. I hate to admit it, but the Kyuubi probably saved his life. Nobody else could have survived in his condition." Iruka tried his hand at a laugh, but it came out hollow and unconvincing. "My advisors, as well as the village council," Hiruzen began hesitantly, not sure if the information was appropriate to reveal to the instructor, "have recommended that Naruto be detained until further notice. They believe him to be a danger to the village." "That's absurd." Iruka was on his feet without realizing it. By all accounts he was backed into a corner, and if he hadn't used the demon's chakra he would have died. Not just him, but Hinata and Sasuke as well. What kind of incompetent? The Sandaime held up a hand, a tiny smirk quirking at his lips. "I am of the same opinion, Iruka. I would not allow Naruto to suffer for something out of his control, and especially not when his actions saved the lives of 2 other students. I'm surprised that certain parties voted the way they did, in light of that information." A frown made the elderly Hokage seem even older than usual. They both knew who it was that he referred to, Hyuga. "In any event, there was one action I could not prevent, nor did I object to. While Naruto remains in Konoha, he will be monitored by Anbu agents who have sealing capabilities, both to ensure his safety and to contain him should there be another incident." Iruka nodded. Even if he didn't like it, it was a reasonable demand. "Hokage-sama." "I'm not sure what to do," Iruka started, sounding worried and much less formal. "If he knows about the Kyuubi now, I don't know what he'll think of me. I'm not sure if I can talk to him about it if he asks. And according to your law, now that he knows the truth he can tell anybody he pleases." To his surprise, the Sandaime chuckled and was just smiling at him, shaking his head. "Iruka, I'm glad you're finding out what it is to be a parent." The Chunin blinked before flushing slightly. The boy will have tough choices ahead, and now that he does know the truth, things will only get harder for him. It's too late to wonder if the law of secrecy I imposed did more harm than good, but as his guardian you must decide what to do from here on out. As a humble suggestion from an old man, he continued with a twinkle in his eyes, "Just spend as much time with him as you can, while you can." Iruka thought over the Hokage's words on the way back to the hospital, and nearly every day afterwards. The time was quickly approaching when Naruto would become a Jonin, and then he and his friends would be off performing missions for the village with a new teacher. This final year would be the last Iruka had, and he intended to take the Sandaime's advice. Sasuke sat alone on a bench in the afternoon sunlight, looking down at his repaired hand. It had been almost a year since Mizuki had damaged it, and although it had healed completely long ago, it served as a permanent reminder to him. "I'm weak." The thought caused his scowl to deepen and he clenched his fist. "I'm weak. I'll never kill Itachi like this." His brother had been a genius, of course, but it made no difference to him. No matter how hard he trained, no matter the effort he put into it, the fact remained, he needed to get stronger. Naruto had insisted years before that he would kill Itachi eventually, the right way, but that way wasn't fast enough. Every day his rage inside seemed to grow, festering and spreading like a blight. The only way to ignore it was to exert himself to exhaustion, but it only served as a distraction. "I need more power, something like what Naruto has. Why does he have it? Where did it come from? And why is it a secret?" Sasuke had thought about such things before, and it only brought about increased frustration. It had also caused him to grow spiteful towards his friend. "Yo, Sasuke." The familiar voice hailed from Naruto, walking towards him with Hinata at his side, as usual. "Something wrong?" They stopped a few meters away, the blonde's hands moving to cup the back of his head like they often did when he was curious or embarrassed. "Nothing really," Sasuke replied, sounding a little annoyed even to himself. "Just wondering if you want to tell us about your weird secret power yet." At the sight of Naruto's grimace, he adopted a lighter tone. "Look, I know you don't want to talk about it, but if you can teach us how to." "I can't," Naruto responded flatly, looking off to the side uncomfortably. "It's not something I was just born with it, all right? I didn't ask for it." Sasuke could tell that he was trying not to get upset, but pushing the issue would eventually make his friend snap. "Well, that answers that, I guess. Still. Alright, whatever, sorry." Sasuke's apology came off a touch insincere, though only Hinata seemed to notice. She wouldn't say anything, however. I need to get stronger or I'll never defeat Itachi. That's all." It was one of the rare times that the boy opened up to his friends, and they were not about to miss the opportunity. "Sasuke, you're better than either of us when it comes to offensive ninjutsu. Your taijutsu is great, and none of us can compete when it comes to handling ranged weapons." Naruto's encouraging response was instant, bouncing back from the gloomy topic like nothing had happened. Everything he said was true as well, a notion echoed by Hinata. Anyo. Iruka Sensei said that you're better than most Chunin with your shuriken control, Sasuke-san. And besides us nobody in the class can beat you in sparring. We're not even Junon yet. And quat. Unfortunately it was only her last words that Sasuke seemed to latch on to. It doesn't matter what rank we are, the Uchiha nearly growled, trying not to glare at the girl. And being the top of the class, better than Chunin? None of that matters. Itachi was an Anbu captain by the time he was 13. I'm nothing compared to him. And quat. If Naruto didn't know better he could have sworn that he had seen tears in Sasuke's eyes. Sasuke we and quat. Never mind. I have some things to take care of today so I can't train. I'll see you tomorrow. And quat. Without waiting for a response he stood and leapt away, escaping over the treetops while his friends stood in silence, watching. I'm worried about him, Naruto-kun, Hinata said quietly, fidgeting with the hem of her coat. She jumped as she felt a hand on her shoulder, looking up to find Naruto smiling in the way he always did to try to cheer her up. The same grin also managed to summon a blush every time. Don't worry, Hinata-chan. You know how Sasuke can be. Besides, he continued, voice taking on a more serious tone, I understand where he's coming from. Just like you do. We just need to help him as best we can, and everything will work out, right? While his proximity made her a tad lightheaded, and his words were comforting in a way, she was doubtful. But what if we don't get put on the same team? Oh, or what if I hold us back? Or Hinata stopped mid-sentence, looking affronted and steadily turning a darker shade of pink. Naruto was laughing, and what's worse he was laughing at her. Tears started to well up before he waved both hands in front of him, breathing deeply and apologizing. Sorry. He brought both hands together in front of him as if begging her forgiveness. I didn't mean to laugh, Hinata-chan, but I just think it's funny that you think you'd hold us back. And quat. Her distress slowly turned into confusion. What was he talking about? Sasuke and I would be a mess without you here to help us with our chakra control, and without you to help us work on our speed we'd be years behind in taijutsu training. We've been friends for 5 years, so you'd better take my word for it when I say you're the best. Naruto's broad grin faded when he saw that Hinata was very red in the face, much more so than he ever remembered. Hey, are you feeling okay? He asked worriedly, hand rising to touch her forehead to check for a fever. Hinata nearly fainted. I'm fine, she stammered, shuffling back a few steps. Her heel caught on a loose stone and she stumbled backwards with a squeak, her arms flailing for balance. Naruto stepped forward quickly, catching her hand with an embarrassed look on his face. Sorry, he said sincerely, a tint of red rising to his cheeks as he helped his friend regain her balance. Come on, let's head to Ichiraku's before training. Half-priced ramen today. Before she could object, not that she wanted to, Naruto was dashing towards his favorite restaurant with Hinata in tow, her hand still grasped firmly in his own. Her face was on fire the whole way, and Ayame's incessant teasing did little to help the poor girl after they had arrived. The teams have already been decided? Kiba asked incredulously, Akamaru echoing his master's concern with a few barks. We're still months away from graduation! And quat. It was the middle of February, and Iruka had just made the announcement that teams were already mostly formed. There were still 30 students in the class, but half of them had been replaced over the course of the nearly 6 years of study. Only those truly fit to become ninja could graduate, and according to their teacher the process was sort of a formality anyway. Those that still remained had what it took. That's correct. Assuming we have no dropouts and nobody fails the graduation exam, we will have 10 3-man teams. You will be separated into groups that complement your skills in some cases, and in others you will be placed in a team where you will be filling a specific role. Before any of that, however, the potential for teamwork is first and foremost. As Junon you will begin taking on D rank missions that carry little to no risk. However, eventually you will go on C rank, and on rare occasions B rank, missions. On these you will often find yourselves in situations where you must trust your team implicitly, and teamwork will be of the utmost importance. A lack of trust and teamwork will kill you and your allies. And quat. Iruka allowed his statement to sink in for a moment before continuing. His students had spent the last 5 years training and maturing. It was time to become adults. Sensei, when do we find out which team we're on? The question came from Sakura, who seemed to be eyeing Sasuke worriedly. Ino rolled her eyes at the pink-haired girl. Right after you graduate. We will have one final day of class wherein you all will be assigned your teams and new instructors. And before you ask, he smirked, giving Sakura and Ino a wry look, you may not request to be on anybody else's team, nor are you allowed to change teams once you're on one. I expect you all to work hard with you assigned teams, understood? A chorus of yes. Sensei brought a nod from Iruka, who then led them to the yard for weapons training. One day I'll be able to manage a Fuma Shuriken like you, Sasuke, Naruto sighed as his friend's weapon sliced through the centers of 3 targets in an arch, looping around to embed itself into another only an arm's length from Sasuke. It seemed the Uchiha had a natural talent not only for fire techniques, but for controlling unconventional ninja tools as well. Just takes practice, he grunted, not feeling the modesty that he communicated. He had long since graduated the conventional kunai and shuriken that the rest of the class seemed stuck with. At least a handful, including his friends, had managed to become halfway proficient with a wider variety of weaponry. Anyway, you guys think we'll be on a team together? He yanked the blade from its lodging point, flicking his wrist to fold it back before handing it to Naruto. You bet. Naruto responded confidently, taking aim and flipping the weapon open again. His throwing technique was good, but his aim was off. The first target was hit cleanly, but the second only lost an arm, and the third was missed entirely. He cursed and leapt to recover the shuriken in midair so that it wouldn't pass right over their heads. He caught it deftly in the center circle, muttering to himself as he dug it into the ground to stop the spinning. Maybe I'll get better at this before then. And quad. I think it's likely, Hinata offered, her nervous habit already showing itself. Iruka Sensei said we would be placed together based on teamwork, so I think. Probably. And quad. She trailed off, the lack of confidence in her own statement causing her words to fail. Sasuke just shrugged. Naruto, however, continued his show of confidence. Come on, who here has worked together as long as we have ? And quad. Ino, Shikamaru, and Choji have been together longer, Sasuke pointed out. I think their parents are all friends or something. Kiba and Shino seem to get along. I think, and Sakura hangs around them sometimes. And quad. Well, I bet they'll be on teams together like we'll be, Naruto continued, unconcerned. He tried his hand at another throw with similar results. He scowled. I mean, even if we're on different teams it'll be okay, right? Whenever we're in town we'll still meet up and train together and stuff. Plus that'll be 3 pretty strong teams, huh? His friends could tell that he was pushing the limits of his own optimism, but they didn't interrupt. It was hard to deflate Naruto's enthusiasm, even if it was forced. I have requested you be placed on a team with the Uchiha and the Aburame. Their skills will supplement yours best. And quad. Hyashi's icy gaze met the impassive features of his eldest daughter. She had learned well over the years to keep emotion from her face. He waited for her acknowledgement, but it didn't come. Our family has great influence over the village, including the academy. And quad. Still nothing. You should be grateful for my benevolence on your behalf. And quad. Hinata had begun quivering very slightly. I want to stay with my friends. And quad. She whispered, so meekly that Hyashi thought he must have imagined it. He must have. Hinata would never dare question him. What did you say? He asked in a falsely calm tone. His rising fury betrayed the facade. I said I want to stay with my friends, father. And quad. Her voice was more solid now, confident. Both of them. And quad. Despite the iron will she had forced upon herself she dared not mention Naruto by name. Her father was no fool, however. It was not often her father displayed any emotion, even if he did seem to come across as perpetually harsh. But his daughter, the heiress to the Hyuga clan, had just openly denied him. The only time she had felt killing intent stronger had been in the woods with Naruto. Hyuga Hinata, he stated slowly as he stood, stepping purposefully towards his kneeling daughter. For years I have invested in your training. And quad. Another step seemed to shake the floor. For years I have tried to rid you of your pathetic weaknesses. And quad. The entire room felt heavy now, and Hinata's breathing quickened. For years I have held out for the day you would be worthy of your birthright. And for what? In a single motion she was against the wall, pinned by a hand gripped about her throat. She gasped and grabbed at his hand, feet desperately kicking against the wall, trying to find a foothold. You refuse my kindness. You rebuke my advice. You allow your younger sister to surpass you. You are worthless. And quad. As if those words were the last he intended to speak to her, Hyashi tossed his coughing daughter to the ground, disgusted. Get out. And quad. Naruto, she choked, struggling to her feet. Her father turned back to her, eyes widening in wonder. Not only had she defied him, but she sought to speak out of her place also. What a waste of blood. What about the demon child? He spat, eyes burning. He's not. Like you said, father. And quad. Hinata cursed herself for not being stronger. She wished she could defend her friend, the one person that gave her courage, that made her feel even the slightest bit comfortable being herself. But she could barely string a sentence together in the presence of the clan leader. Even if she was a failure, even if she didn't deserve to be Naruto's friend, she wouldn't allow him to be looked down on like that. Hyashi merely stood, stiff, staring down at his daughter. I see the demon has gotten to you too, daughter, he said coldly, sneering. That child should have been killed 12 years ago when. And quad. Hyashi ground his teeth, growling at nothing before sweeping out of the audience chamber. but not before one last contemptuous note. Until you prove yourself worthy of the Hyuga name, do not return to this compound. Trash does not belong in my family. Hinata sat very still, unblinking, staring at the wall with tears flowing freely down her face. She felt empty, like all of her being had just been taken from her. Every dream and aspiration lay shattered on the floor in front of her. Her father had finally disowned her completely. Long ago Hanabi had been named the new successor as a result of Hinata's failures, but never had she imagined Hiashi would cast her out. Her mind was blank even as she wandered from the Hyuga estate, a chilled wind biting at her pale face. It was a bitter, cold night. Hinata wandered the streets aimlessly, as if searching for herself until dawn's first light crested the walls of the Konoha. Only then did reality set in, only then did she realize how alone she was. Then the tears came, in a back alley near the center of village. It felt like they might never stop. Hinata-chan. And what? Naruto hesitated, glancing at Sasuke before looking back at her. Her clothes were rumpled and dirty, and although neither of them would say it, she smelled like it had been days since her last proper bath. 3 days earlier she had come to class looking exhausted, her eyes red with dark circles underneath. She had not said a word the entire day. Since then it had been difficult to get even a nod out of the girl. I know I ask a lot, but are you okay? As usual, no response. She just stared blankly at the desk in front of her. Naruto, Sasuke, Iruka said sharply from below. The two in question blinked and looked down at their instructor. The class was empty. They had been dismissed for the day. Please head home. And what? They both glanced down at Hinata, but after a hard look from Iruka they both muttered apologies and stalked off. Naruto stopped at the doorway, biting his lip and looking from Iruka to Hinata twice before exiting quickly. Iruka sighed, walking slowly to the desk one step down from theirs. He sat slowly, scratching the back of his head. Hinata, he started gently, not sure how to delicately navigate the topic. Will you tell me what's going on, please? She remained silent, showing no sign that Iruka had even been heard. Hinata, he said again clearly, a little louder. Finally, he reached up, prodded her right in the center of her forehead, enunciating each part of her name separately. Hinata. And what? Why yes? Finally, the girl looked confused, as if she had no idea how she had gotten there. Will you tell me what's going on, please? And what? And nothing, sensei. And what? Hinata blinked several times blearily, looking even more tired now that she had been brought to. Hinata, your friends may not ask you because they don't know how, but don't try to lie to your teacher. I've been getting to know you for nearly 6 years, too, and I can tell when one of my students hasn't slept for days and looks like she's been living on the streets. And what? She quavered visibly, biting her lip. Now, I'll only ask you one more time. What's going on? For a long moment she stared at him, tears brimming, and for a time he thought she might not answer. Then, all at once, she burst into tears and began stammering, unable to form coherent sentences through it all. Iruka awkwardly patted her shoulder, trying to calm her down. Whatever he had expected from the normally reserved girl, it had not been this. He waited to see if the flow would stop on its own before speaking gently. Hey now, calm down. I'm not mad at you. Just take it slow, and explain from the beginning, alright? As Hinata gradually calmed enough to begin her story, Iruka moved to sit next to her in Naruto's usual seat. The Chunin had thought, at one time, that he could not have held greater distaste for Hyuga Hiashi. He was sorely mistaken. As Hinata stuttered through her heartbreaking tale, Iruka had to squeeze his hands together to prevent them from shaking. He was ready to spit fire before she even filled him in on the last 3 days. You've been living on the streets for 3 nights? He asked slowly, carefully. If he spoke too fast he was afraid that he might explode. Her miserable nod confirmed this had been the case. Hinata, why didn't you tell anybody? She didn't respond, and only seemed to shrink into her chair like she had some fear of being reprimanded. Iruka shook his head. This wasn't the way to help. Come on, he sighed, clicking his tongue and standing up. Hinata didn't move. She just sat there, looking up at him blankly. You're coming home with me. I won't have my students staying out on the streets. You're going to stay with me until I can find you a place on your own. And what? Despite her weak protests, he managed to get her out of the classroom and following him slowly back to the apartment. Sensei, I see can't, she murmured, sobs threatening to take her again. I'll just be an inconvenience. I'll be trouble for you and I'm not worth. And what? You can, because I said so. You're not trouble, or an inconvenience, and you're worth more than what your damn father thinks, that's for sure. And what? The words had left his mouth before he could think about them, accompanied by an angry curse shortly thereafter. Hinata's eyes went wide, causing a few tears to streak down her dirtied cheeks. Sorry, Hinata, he said softly, trying to smile. I promise, it's alright. Just do it as a favor to me, okay? Her eyes returned to the ground, and a full minute must have passed before she nodded. As they walked in silence, Iruka seriously considered an attempt on Hyashi's life like he had years before. As the door clicked closed behind them, Naruto came trotting around the corner. When he spotted Hinata, his eyes went wide, the broadest grin appearing on his face. As his mouth opened to say something, however, Iruka held up his hand and shook his head. The boy blinked, glancing from the obviously downtrodden girl back to his teacher. He nodded slowly, backing up to let them pass. In short order, Iruka had drawn a hot bath and handed Hinata a towel and the smallest change of clothes he could find, likely some of Naruto's old garments. She merely nodded the whole time, staring at the floor. For a while after her teacher left, she stood by the closed door, mind working slowly through what he had said. But she was too tired to work through it. Her body ached, her eyes hurt, and everything felt fuzzy. Worst of all, she still felt empty. Nearly an hour later she emerged from the bathroom, cleansed of all but the worst of her grime. But such mire took more than a bath to purify. Some time later Iruka found her standing there, not sure where to go or what to do. He gently coaxed her to a simple, clean bedroom and said something she couldn't understand. Something about sleeping, maybe, and Naruto had been mentioned somewhere. All her mind registered was the bed, onto which she crawled as soon as the door was closed. After 3 days of no sleep, 3 days of emotional strain and pain, 3 days of waking nightmares, 3 days of repeating her father's words over and over in her head, 3 days of crying for hours on end, 3 days of contemplating things no person should ever have to consider. After 3 long days, Hinata slept. Everything felt oddly warm and soft, and for a long time Hinata stayed very still, not wanting to open her eyes and bring the respite to an end. It took quite a while for her to realize she was neither at the Hyuga estate, nor somewhere outside. The realization caused her eyes to snap open with a soft gasp. A rush of muddled memories flooded in, and she sat up with a start, eyes looking wildly around the room. Where? It was still dark outside, the light from a crescent moon trickling into the small bedroom through a window across the room. Hinata bit her lip, remembering vaguely that Iruka had brought her back to his home and had her clean up before giving her the bedroom. I can't believe I let myself be such an inconvenience, she thought miserably, burying her face in her knees and trying not to cry again. All I do is cry and get in the way. I should leave before. She blinked, realizing the clothes she had on were not her own, but they seemed strangely familiar. Naruto-kun's. Her feeling of shame quickly turned into embarrassment, cheeks flushing at the realization that she now wore a pair of baggy tan cargo shorts and a loose gray t-shirt, the same clothes Naruto had worn up until the year before. Hinata gathered herself mentally, taking in a deep breath and exhaling slowly. I'll just leave a note and some money for Iruka Sensei for taking care of me. I can't stay here. With that thought placed firmly in her mind, she swept her feet off the side of the bed, prepared to stand. She blinked, eyes drawn to the bedside table. A plate of onigiri sat next to the reading light, with a note leaned against it containing Iruka's handwriting. Naruto thought you might be hungry when you woke up, so we made these for you. Itadakimasu! And quat. She couldn't hold back the tears anymore. A fresh wave hit her hard and she curled back up on the bed, not knowing what to do with herself. But these tears felt different. For some reason she didn't feel sad or hurt, but strangely warm. It was a difficult sensation to grapple with. Crying was an action she was used to, but this felt different for some reason, almost like it was good. After a few minutes of getting a hold of herself again, Hinata sat back up, wiping tears from her face. Her stomach grumbled and she looked at the plate again, feeling guilty. But Iruka had made it for her, and she might feel worse for not eating it. Another grumble convinced her. The door opened quietly, for which Hinata was grateful. She glanced worriedly both ways down the hall, biting her lip again before stepping out silently. The apartment was small but clean, and very neat. It took only a few seconds to find the front door. From there all she needed was a pencil and paper. As she passed by the living room, however, she froze, eyes going wide as she realized the one thing she had neglected to consider. She had even seen his name right in front of her and not registered it. Naruto lived with Iruka. Naruto's back was to her as he continued his very early morning exercises, doing pull-ups on a bar hanging from the ceiling. He must have been distracted by something, or just very into his workout, because it took him a while to notice Hinata's presence. Her face was a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and fear, and it was already several shades of red into its coloring. It was bad enough that she was in Naruto's living room, but she was now watching him exercise like some stalker. The fact that he wasn't wearing a shirt didn't help much, either. When he did finally realize she was there, he blinked, letting himself drop to the ground. As he turned, the first thing she noticed was his broad smile, as welcoming and friendly as it always was. "Morning, Hinata-chan," he whispered loudly, picking up a towel to wipe away the accumulated sweat. He had apparently been at it for a while. "I hope you slept okay. My bed can be kinda uncomfortable." And quat. Naruto grinned sheepishly, scratching the back of his neck with one hand. It was then that Hinata noticed the makeshift bedding that had been set up on the couch, along with a pile of clothes that could only belong to Naruto sitting nearby. Anyo, she stammered, fingers already pressing together. Why your bed, Naruto-kun? He shrugged and sat down on the couch, pulling a shirt over his head before responding. Iruka Sensei said you needed to rest cause you were really tired, so I moved my stuff out of my room so you could sleep better. And quat. He blinked as Hinata looked like she was about to cry, a few sniffs coming about before Naruto jumped up and waved his hands in front of him. No, it's really okay. Iruka Sensei's couch is really comfortable, and I always exercise here in the morning anyway, and he was cut off as Hinata collided with him, knocking him back onto the couch with a soft grunt. For a very long moment Naruto sat very still, both incredibly confused and unbelievably awkward. Hinata's face was buried in his chest, her fingers clutching at the fabric of his shirt. She was shuddering and, thinking his friend was cold, he wrapped his arms around her shoulders. He had seen somebody do that once. A very warm feeling sprung up in his chest, and his face felt a little hot. Hinata-chan, she shook her head against his chest, and he stopped. What was he supposed to do? Iruka hadn't said anything about this when he explained things about girls. Finally, to his great relief, Hinata spoke, though it was so quiet he had to lean down a little to hear. I'm sorry, Naruto-kun, she sniffed, her voice muffled by his shirt. Despite the burning shame and terrible feeling of inadequacy she felt, it felt nice to just be there. She wanted to talk about how she was feeling, and why she was crying, and many things, but the words wouldn't come. Part of it had to do with her own confusion. So much had happened in such a short time, and Iruka and Naruto were being so kind to her. It was too much to process. You don't have to be sorry, Hinata-chan, Naruto said quietly, sounding strangely somber rather than his usual elated self. He didn't even seem uncomfortable or awkward. Hinata wanted to raise her head, but she didn't think herself capable of meeting his gaze. Iruka Sensei wouldn't tell me what happened, but I knew something was wrong for a few days. You don't have to tell me, he continued quickly, as if worried he might have offended her. But you can stay here as long as you want to. Iruka Sensei said it was okay. I really don't mind sleeping on the couch. I promise! And quat. I'll just be a burden. And quat, she mumbled, fingers tightening on his shirt. No, you won't! And quat. Naruto said with such confidence that it caused her to finally raise her head, red-rimmed eyes examining his bright blues. He wasn't lying. Something her father had drilled in his children over the years was the ability to read people, and although Naruto rarely deceived anybody, she had trouble accepting his straight honesty. Her confused expression drew a smirk from the boy. Why would you think that? Iruka Sensei invited you here and said you can stay, which means you're welcome here, and he must want you here, right? And I want you here too, Hinata-chan. And quat. He was just telling the truth, but for some reason it made him feel squirmy inside his stomach. Hinata blinked several times, processing what Naruto had just told her in what felt like slow motion. Welcome here. The notion was alien to her. Wanted here. Naruto-kun wants me here. The color slowly began to creep into her cheeks. It felt wrong. The last time she had felt welcome or wanted anywhere was with her mother, who had long since passed away. Since then only self-doubt and failure had been her company. But now, she didn't dare allow herself to step fully through the door of hope. But maybe just taking a look through wouldn't be too bad. She lowered her head back to his chest before he could ask if she was feeling okay again. A slow, silent nod indicated that she understood. And then came the awkward silence. A few minutes eventually turned into half an hour of quiet, and while Naruto gradually got more comfortable with the situation, reality sank in for Hinata over time. If Iruka had not walked into the living room when he did, she was fairly positive that she would have exploded. Good morning, you two, he yawned. The smallest mischievous smirk twitched his lips as Hinata sprang away from her friend, ending up next to him staring at the floor. Her face was so completely red that Iruka couldn't even bring himself to tease them. Naruto, can you come help me make breakfast? We're going to have omelets with rice and salmon today, he remarked cheerily. He turned to leave towards the kitchen, but as he reached the threshold Hinata's voice stopped him. Anyo, she started, on her feet as Iruka turned back. Hinata placed her arms at her sides and bowed, eyes squeezed closed and trying to get rid of the terrible flush. Thank you for welcoming me into your home, Iruka Sensei, she said with surprising clarity. Formalities were deeply ingrained in her from youth, largely thanks to her status. I will work hard to earn my keep and find a place to stay as soon as I can. Thank you, she repeated before straightening, looking awkward and out of place. Iruka began, slightly taken aback. He wasn't used to such formalities or what he considered to be flattering. No need to thank me, Hinata. You can stay here as long as you need to, so don't worry about it. And quat. She blinked at him but nodded, looking back at the floor and clutching the fringe of her shirt, which reminded him. Oh, and your clothes are clean and folded in the linen closet in the hall. We'll get you some more this weekend. And quat. With that he left the living room, whistling to himself as he began preparations for breakfast. Naruto stood and started to follow, stopping next to Hinata and nudging her with his elbow, making her jump a little. He grinned and put his hands behind his head. "You can come help with breakfast after you change, if you want." Iruka Sensei said, "I have to learn how to cook, but I'm not very good at it." He made a face before trotting after their teacher, leaving Hinata to stare after them. More of those strange good tears welled up, but she pushed them down, determined to make herself useful rather than feel sorry for herself. Hinata quickly located and changed into her normal clothes, chastising herself for making Iruka go out of his way to wash them for her. Despite her will to help, however, as she approached the kitchen she slowed, plagued with self-doubt. "I shouldn't get in their way. I'll just... Can you help me with cooking the salmon and setting the table, Hinata?" Iruka asked kindly, giving her an encouraging smile, looking for all the world like a bigger version of Naruto. It made her wonder if her friend had inherited that smile. She nodded quickly, hurrying to help as her teacher had requested. He and Naruto bantered nearly the entire time, their antics making even Hinata smile a little. She surprised herself by giggling once when Naruto did a particularly interesting imitation of the Hokage. Naruto shot Iruka a quick grin while Hinata wasn't looking. His instructor winked back. Things would turn out okay, eventually. "Ready for the exam?" Iruka asked as they walked towards the academy. It had been 3 months since Hinata had moved in, and although she was still quiet as ever, the girl seemed much less anxious these days. She walked a little straighter, made eye contact with her peers more often, and even spoke with less of a stutter. Iruka wasn't willing to take much credit for any of it, though, as far as he was concerned, just getting away from the Hyuga estate had helped Hinata more than anything he could have done. "Yes, Sensei," they both chimed, glancing at one another immediately after. Naruto grinned, and Hinata smiled demurely. Iruka raised an eyebrow, but didn't comment further. Those two had also grown closer in their friendship after living in close proximity for so long. Naruto still seemed a bit clueless about Hinata's feelings for him, but that was alright. He might realize it eventually. Or possibly not. It was the day of their final test, and although this would be the deciding moment for all of them, nobody seemed nervous. According to Iruka, though, those that remained were pretty much guaranteed to pass, and every one of them had mastered the 3 required jutsu. All of them had proven to be proficient with a variety of ninja tools. In their final year they had studied genjutsu and how to recognize it, though no practical test would be administered. In the end, the students weren't nervous because they had passed the most difficult part of the exam, surviving for 6 years at the academy. One by one they were called into a small side room that held Iruka, another proctor, and a table on top of which 34 head protectors, Hitai 8, sat. Each had a metal guard engraved with the symbol of a Konoha shinobi and were to be presented to a student when they passed the test. Of the 3 friends, Sasuke was called in first. Looking as unconcerned as always, he more or less ignored Naruto's cheer for him to kick some ass and Hinata's small smile. He knew he would pass, as did the rest of the class. And, as expected, he returned minutes later wearing his new headband. "What a joke," he muttered as he sat back down, leaning on the desk and staring out the window. Hinata glanced at Naruto, looking a bit worried, though more for their friend's state of mind than the upcoming test. "Hyuga Hinata," the proctor called, making her jump and swallow. When she looked back to Naruto, he gave her a big smile and placed a hand on her arm. Hinata was fairly sure that he could do that a dozen times a day and she would still flush every time. She nodded and smiled back before standing and making her way to the testing room. Although she became fairly nervous standing in front of the instructors, Iruka's confident nod eased the tension somewhat. A short time later, Hinata emerged from the room as well, her Hitai 8 tied around her neck. She tried not to appear overtly pleased or accomplished. Sasuke had been right, in a way. They had learned the jutsus years before, after all. Naruto, though, was ecstatic enough for both of them, giving a rousing cheer and a thumbs up as soon as she came through the door. Hinata rushed back to her seat so that the rest of the class couldn't get an eyeful of her reddened features. Uzumaki Naruto Dadanquat. The boy nearly jumped out of his seat in excitement. This was it, his first step to becoming Hokage. It may not mean much to the rest of his classmates, but he had worked hard over the last 6 years to accomplish his first smaller goal on the road to Hokage. He bounded down the stairs, turning just before exiting the room to give Hinata and Sasuke another thumbs up. She did her best to give an encouraging smile and nod, while the Uchiha merely glared at nothing outside. "Alright, Naruto, this should be quick. Please perform a henge no jutsu. You can transform into anything you'd like." And quat. Iruka nodded at his fellow Chunin's words, waiting for his student. "Yes, Sensei, henge no jutsu," he said clearly. A puff of smoke enveloped him for a moment before revealing a perfect copy of Iruka standing in front of them, holding up 2 fingers and grinning broadly. "Very good. Next, Kawarimi no jutsu please." And quat. Naruto nodded again, disappearing in a puff of smoke, a section of a log falling to the ground with a dull thud where he had just been standing. Iruka and the proctor glanced around before noticing the blonde standing behind them. Very good. Lastly, perform the Bunshin no Jutsu, please. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Naruto murmured, making sure to focus only enough chakra to form one clone. The copy appeared next to him, scratching the back of his head and looking a little bored. The proctor seemed impressed, but not quite enthusiastic. I don't mean to split hairs here, but as impressive as a Kage Bunshin is at your age, the test requires you perform the Bunshin no Jutsu to pass, the stranger began, though Iruka cut in before he could continue the objection. Actually, the rules of the exam state that a Bunshin must be procured. A Kage Bunshin falls into that category. Not to mention the latter jutsu is much more useful than a simple Bunshin. Iruka smiled sweetly at the other proctor, who grunted and tried not to openly show contempt for Naruto. Alright, good enough. You pass, get a forehead protector and go back to your seat. He marked something on his clipboard as Naruto approached the table, muttering something under his breath about cheating. Congratulations, Naruto, Iruka smiled, holding the Hittite towards his student with no small amount of pride showing. You've earned it. If Naruto's grin was any bigger, his cheeks might have torn. He took the headband reverently, looking at it for a moment before lifting it to his forehead, tying it over the ever-present indigo wrap. This was it. He was finally a Genin. Despite what everybody else had said, he had done it. He tried to control his gait as he left the testing chamber, but was running by the time he made it to the classroom door. He burst in just as Sakura was making her way down the stairs to take her exam. The glare she afforded him could not put a damper on his mood in the least. Yeah. He cheered, making half the class jump before glowering at the noise that Naruto was making. He didn't care, though. In one leap he made it to the top row, lifting Hinata from her chair and into a tight hug despite her alarmed sounds of protest. He put her down quickly, still smiling, but a bit more subdued now that he had gotten it out of his system. He turned to Sasuke and extended his fist, hoping for a return gesture. The dark-haired boy eyed the hand dubiously before sighing, lifting his fist to bump his knuckles with Naruto unenthusiastically. That seemed to be enough for Naruto, however, as he sat back down afterwards and seemed to be radiating joy. After the last student returned from their test, the room went silent as Iruka entered with a stack of papers. Alright everyone. Congratulations on passing your exams, but as I've said before, things will only get harder from here. You are all still new Genin, and have much to learn. I have compiled the team lists and will now reveal the team assignments. Every student in the room had their eyes trained on their instructor, knowing that his decisions would shape their futures. Iruka paused for dramatic effect, smirking only slightly as he watched a few lean in. Ino and Sakura looked to be on the edge of their seats. For once Naruto seemed almost as nonchalant as Sasuke, though Hinata's index fingers were now pressed together, indicating her worry. The first 6 teams were assigned in short order. Nobody seemed too surprised or unhappy with the results. As Iruka had said months before, there were many factors behind putting a team together, and even if his decisions were unexpected, they would be respected nonetheless. Finally, he started on the 7th team. Next, the 7th group. Most of the remaining students, with the exception of the aforementioned 2 girls, seemed either uninterested or unworried, so his delays meant little now. Uzumaki Naruto, he started, remaining perfectly casual as the blonde boy perked up. Uchiha Sasuke. As his name was called, Sasuke barely moved, fingers folded in front of him as he stared at Iruka. It was obvious to the entire class who the 3rd member of their team would be, but Naruto still sat on the edge of his seat, and Hinata closed her eyes and offered a silent prayer. Hyuga Hinata. She breathed a sigh of relief, and Naruto jumped up to celebrate again. Kiba, Shino, and Sakura were placed on a team together, as were Ino, Shikamaru, and Choji as teams 8 and 10 respectively. Ino and Sakura immediately lamented not being placed with their beloved Sasuke-kun, while the rest seemed comfortable enough with the choices. After letting them converse for a moment, Iruka drew their attention back to him. Your new Jonin instructors will be here at noon, and from then on you will be under their tutelage. I expect you to give them the same respect you have afforded me these past years. Best of luck, Genin. Class dismissed. Iruka smiled as his students dispersed, most moving to their new groups to get acquainted, if they were not already, over lunch. He watched them go silently, giving Naruto and his friends a small wave as they exited, which 2 of them returned. You're all adults now. Best of luck, Naruto, Hinata, Sasuke. I wonder if the rest of the instructors are late, too, Naruto pondered, leaning back in his seat between Hinata and Sasuke. They had been waiting since before noon, and it had been nearly a half an hour since then already. He hoped that their teacher wouldn't be lazy. Sorry I'm late, a familiar voice droned. All 3 looked around, blinking, before noticing the man sitting in the desk just behind them. He was tall, with his forehead protector lowered over one eye, and he wore a dark blue mask that covered everything below the bridge of his nose. His silver hair was spiked up into the side, and despite its ostentatious appearance one might correctly assume that it actually grew that way. His overall attitude seemed bored, or at the very least overly relaxed. Kakashi-sensei. Naruto gasped. He had promised himself, and Iruka, that he would be respectful, but seeing the man that had taught him his favorite jutsu had caught him off guard. Not to mention, without him Naruto would never have been able to pass the Jinan exam. You look kind of familiar. Where have I seen you before? ? It was unclear if the man was being difficult or if he actually had forgotten the boy. Seeing as Naruto was a bit too infamous to forget, they bet on the prior. After feigning a struggle to recall, Kakashi shrugged. Oh well, let's head outside to make our introductions. After settling on a terraced balcony, Kakashi leaning against the railing while his new students sat on the steps, he addressed them a little more formally. My name is Hokage Kakashi. I understand that you three go pretty far back, so we can skip part of the introduction. But just for my benefit, I'd like your names, hobbies, and your highest aspiration. If you'd like to start, Mr. Spiky Blonde. Naruto made a face, but obliged with a smirk. Uzumaki Naruto. My hobbies are training and trying different kinds of ramen at Ichiraku's. My dream is to be Hokage one day. I'll be the best there ever was. Kakashi quirked an eyebrow. Well, that's one you don't hear often. Understandable for a kid in his situation, though. Hyuga Hinata. At their teacher's nod she had continued the introductions, fighting not to let her self-consciousness get the better of her. Anyo, I enjoy pressing flowers and training to get stronger. My dream is. And she stopped there, blinking at Kakashi. What was her dream? I'm not sure, Kakashi-sensei. Hinata bowed her head, embarrassed, staring at the ground. Again Kakashi raised an eyebrow. I suppose your dream can be to find a dream to work towards, he commented wryly before turning to the last member. Uchiha Sasuke. He was the reason that Kakashi had been assigned to the team. Last one. Uchiha Sasuke. Outside of training my hobbies aren't of much interest. My ambition is to kill a certain someone. His tone was flat, eyes hard. There was no doubt who he was referring to, and in that moment Kakashi had no doubt of his will to succeed in that endeavor. Well, it's nice to see some diversity in my team. Now, on to business. He pushed off of the railing, stretching with a sigh. Iruka Sensei was not allowed to share this information with you, but now that you're assigned a team it's time you learned. None of you are Jinan yet. As usual, 3 pairs of eyes blinked, confused. What do you mean sensei? We just passed our test, Naruto started, sounding not only perplexed but a little annoyed. The test is only meant to find out if you're able to become Jinan. Each Jonin has the final say as to whether or not their students actually earn the title. By the end of this week, only 3 teams will remain from the original 10. The students that fail their new instructor's test will return to the academy. Any questions so far? Naruto and Hinata sat in stunned silence, while Sasuke merely glared. None of them dared ask if he was serious. Kakashi didn't seem like the type to joke around. Finally, Naruto spoke up, though it was not what any of them expected to hear. Only 2 other teams, Kakashi-sensei, he corrected, smirking confidently. Since we're definitely going to pass. Sasuke didn't move, but after a moment Hinata nodded, trying her best to show even a semblance of the confidence that her friend held. We'll see about that. Meet me at the 3rd training ground at 5, tomorrow morning. Our test is going to be survival training. He waved and started to walk off, though turned just before reaching the edge of the balcony. Oh, and don't eat any breakfast. Trust me, you won't want to. His one visible eye squinted in a way that made them think he was smiling before he was gone in a cloud of white smoke. AHG. Naruto groaned, falling onto his back. Why'd we have to get the crazy instructor? He sighed, scowling up at the clouds. From the way he talks it's like he wants to fail us. Anyo. I think we'll do okay, Hinata offered timidly, not really feeling her own statement's attempt at assurance. We're already a good team, right? They had begun practicing some maneuvers that year, at Iruka's suggestion. It had not been required for their grades, but he had mentioned it to the class as something to be prepared for. Hinata's right, Sasuke grunted, already walking off. We've been training together for years. It won't be a problem. Just like that he was gone, apparently as unconcerned as he had been that morning about the Jinan exam. Naruto couldn't help but smile at his friends. Sasuke had gotten a lot more callous over the years, but he was still one of them. Yeah, you guys are right. Come on Hinata, let's go try some more tree climbing. I think I've almost got the technique down. Can we try walking on the river after that? I really want to. And Naruto continued to chatter away as they walked together to their usual training spot. His demeanor calmed Hinata down some, like it always did, and the one-sided conversation never seemed to bother her. She suppressed a small smile. They would be fine after all. Sensei, you're late again, Naruto teased half-heartedly. His team had arrived on time that morning, and it seemed none of them had eaten breakfast as directed. 2 hours had passed before Kakashi showed up, making a lame excuse about a cat crossing his path. Sorry again, you three. Now then, you all remembered to skip breakfast? They all nodded, Naruto with a little resentment showing through. Good. Now I can explain our exercise for the day. And quat. He pulled out an alarm clock and set it on one of 3 log posts in the middle of the clearing. He then pulled out 2 bells and held them up so that they were clearly visible. You have until noon to get these bells from me. Whoever fails to get a bell will not be given lunch, and will also fail my test. And quat. Naruto only glowered more, but Hinata simply blinked before offering an observation. Sensei, there are only 2 bells. And quat. Kakashi seemed to smile at the comment, which made her a bit uncomfortable. That is correct. Only 2 of you will be able to pass my test, and the third will return to the academy. And quat. He waited for Naruto to stop protesting and ignored Hinata's hurt expression. It's also possible that none of you will pass the test, meaning all 3 might return to the academy. So let me be very clear, he said calmly, tone silencing their objections. I expect you to use any means necessary to get these from me, including deadly force. And quat. Without waiting for them to interject, he hit the top of the clock, setting the alarm for noon. Ready? Begin! And quat. Sasuke and Hinata all but vanished into the woods surrounding the clearing, but to their surprise, and the quirked eyebrow of Kakashi, Naruto remained standing at the center of the clearing. He was looking at their instructor dubiously, trying to work out what was going on. Something told him that this was off. I don't believe you, he said finally, folding his arms. Kakashi blinked his eye, head cocked slightly to the side as he decided what to make of this brash youth. There's no way they'd let you send just one of us back to the academy. That doesn't make any sense. Iruka Sensei said that teams were always in 3s with one jonin instructor. And quat. You're no longer at the academy, Naruto. I make the rules here, and if I tell you that you are going back to the academy, you are. And quat. Kakashi stared back at Naruto lazily, fastening the 2 bells loosely on his belt. The boy clenched his fists, mind working through his options, before he vanished in a blur to join his comrades. What do we do? Hinata asked in a worried whisper, eyeing Kakashi through a gap in the trees. They had all suppressed their chakra so that it would be harder to sense them, something she had taught the other 2 how to do over the years. We need to focus on getting those bells, then we can figure it out, Sasuke said quietly, taking in the surroundings. Naruto nodded, but still seemed upset and distracted. We'll just run through our formations and maneuvers like we practiced. Remember, don't hesitate to use force, like he said. If he wants us to really go for them we will, got it? They nodded again. Hinata activated her Byakugan and took a deep breath while her teammates got into position. She would worry about consequences later. Kakashi had drawn a small book from his belt pouch, a clearly adult-themed novel judging by the cover. Despite his relaxed appearance he was completely tuned into his surroundings, waiting and calculating as he sensed the Genin moving closer. One behind, one above, one at a distance. At least they're working together. Doten, earth rupture. Hinata's jutsu crushed the ground below him, catching his feet as a fist of shuriken came flying from the side. Everything worked as he had anticipated. However, the weapon struck him directly, but a moment later he appeared behind Sasuke, the impaled log replacement clattering to the ground. Too slow, he muttered, hand already striking at the back of the boy's head. Except, he wasn't too slow. Sasuke had twisted at the last second, spinning for a hard kick as if he had expected Kakashi to appear there. The jonin was forced to block, genuine surprise written on his hidden features. But he had no time for being impressed. He shoved Sasuke away, thrusting his book back into the back pocket. All right, no flirting paradise then, he sighed, readying himself for the next attack. He had yet to see Naruto, but he could feel the boy's chakra signature everywhere. Guess I got distracted. But this is impressive. A horde of Narutos had surrounded the clearing, all brandishing kunai and grinning at the jonin. Even I couldn't make this many. I guess the reports about him were true. The clones were not incredibly coordinated, but they did show a surprising amount of sentience and awareness. As they charged they came in formations, executing maneuvers in an attempt to back Kakashi towards the nearby river. It was a simple ploy to see through, and Kakashi instead fought the clones towards the 3 stumps. In no time they were all but cleared, only a handful left looking more than a little frustrated. Come now, you're going to have to try harder. Than the jonin was cut off as a fireball blasted from above him, forcing a dodge right into the path of a Fuma Shuriken. Kakashi was not considered a legendary ninja for no reason. However, rather than dodge, he caught the weapon deftly, tossing it back into the woods where he sensed Sasuke's chakra. However, a second shuriken was only a few meters from him already, having been hidden in the shadow of its predecessor. The shadow shuriken technique. The Uchiha boy shows some promise. Things did not go as expected as he reached for the next. However, Hinata had moved so fast that even he had a hard time tracking her movement. The girl bent forward calmly, allowing the weapon to pass mere centimeters from her head and into Kakashi's outstretched hand. Her hand was already outstretched, the tips of her fingers almost closed around one of the bells. Crap! He withdrew his hand at the last second and bent backwards, effectively drawing his belt out of reach and allowing the shuriken to fly over him instead. He pushed off of the ground hard, vaulting into the air and taking a moment to take in their positions. These kids mean business. It hasn't even been an hour yet. Then he blinked, and looked down. Naruto was falling away from him towards the ground, grinning broadly, both bells held between his fingers. When did he? Kakashi realized how he had been tricked a moment later, smacking himself in the forehead as he landed. You transformed one of your clones into the other shuriken, knowing that Hinata's attack would force me to dodge. Where did you three learn that? Naruto looked overly pleased with himself, while Sasuke just smirked and Hinata blushed deeply. We thought it up, Naruto proclaimed proudly, dangling the two bells from his fingertips. Sasuke's really good with shuriken, and he taught himself the Kage Shuriken no Jutsu. Since I can make a lot of Kage Bunshine, it's easy to transform myself into a Fuma Shuriken without anyone noticing. Hinata's faster than both of us, so it was only natural she be the one to engage the target directly. And quad. He said it so matter-of-factly that Kakashi couldn't help but shake his head and admit defeat. Well, I guess you won this round. But remember, only two of you can pass, he reminded them, and suddenly Sasuke's scowl returned, followed closely by Hinata's uncomfortable expression. Yeah, I know, Naruto said nonchalantly, tossing a bell to each side. His friends caught them automatically and stood staring at him, Sasuke looking nonplussed and Hinata horrified. You can pass them, and I'll go back to the academy. And quad. Naruto-kun. Hinata breathed, tears already welling in her eyes. You can't, you need quad. Hinata's right, Naruto, Sasuke said with a shrug, tossing his bell on the ground at Kakashi's feet. We're not going to let you go back to the academy by yourself. If you go, I'm going back too. And quad. His hands were already in his pockets, eyes on their instructor. He didn't seem the least bit concerned. Guys, come on, Naruto laughed, looking from one to the other. The final exam is easy, I can just take it again next year. No reason for you two to miss a year of experience if you don't have to. And quad. Hinata shook her head, in full agreement with Sasuke. She stepped forward, handing her bell to Kakashi with a polite bow before stepping back to her friends. Together, or not at all, she said quietly, fidgeting with her coat but looking determined. She rarely did anything with full confidence, but this was one time in her life she was very sure of herself. Being separated from Naruto was not an option. During the ordeal, Kakashi had watched silently, marveling at the phenomenon occurring before him. I suppose there's a first time for everything, he sighed, scratching the back of his neck as if embarrassed. After a moment he smiled, or it looked like he was smiling. Anyway, you all passed. And quad. They blinked, as stunned as he had expected. What, Kakashi-sensei? Naruto asked bluntly, unsure how they had gone from all failing to passing in an instant. I said that you all pass. This test was a test of your teamwork, not your combat or survival skills. And quad. They were blinking again, though it was Sasuke who questioned him this time. If it was a test of our teamwork, why didn't you pass us when Naruto got the bells from you? And quad. Accomplishing your mission objective is important, you're right, Kakashi relented, a twinkle appearing in his visible eye. Some might even argue that it's the most important part of being a ninja. However, he continued, leaning down so he could meet their eyes directly. It's important to follow the rules of our village, and especially my rules if I'm your teacher. However, there's a saying that goes along with that. Those who break the rules are scum. But those that don't take care of their friends are even worse than scum. While I didn't get to properly demonstrate the first part of that saying, you three have proven that you care about one another. You were all willing to return to the academy together so that you could remain a team, and for that, you passed. And quad. It took a moment for everything to register, but they got the message. Sasuke let out a haughty humph while Hinata blushed and stared at the ground, pushing her index fingers together. Naruto simply cheered, looking quite the opposite of the serious youth that had challenged Kakashi on his rule earlier. This will be an interesting adventure with these three. And just like that, Team 7 was formed. Is this the third or fourth time this week? Naruto asked rhetorically, pulling a thorn out of his coat wearily. Fifth, Sasuke supplied with an equal amount of enthusiasm, hoisting the small cat up to peer at it boredly. He held it by the scruff of its neck, disallowing any struggle from the annoyed creature. First two were cats, then a dog, then a cat, now this one. Hera, the name was ? And quad. Sasuke, you might hurt her, came Hinata's small, fretting voice. As usual, she had spotted the runaway using her Byakugan and the other two had closed in from opposite sides. All in all, the team was getting pretty good at catching stray pets, although it was beginning to wear on them. Sasuke huffed and tossed Hera to her, the cat flailing a bit but landing upright on her shoulder and hissing at the boy. I'm getting tired of these errands. That's what they are, not even worth being called missions. Naruto turned his head to the side at his friend's words, shrugging noncommittally but of more or less the same mind. Even Hinata's couldn't argue with him, although she was more willing than either of them to perform such mundane tasks for as long as possible. Sooner or later they would have to engage in dangerous missions where they might be hurt, or worse. Her imagination was just about to get the better of her when the telltale cloud of smoke signaled Kakashi's arrival. Yo, he said placidly, traveling between the three in a way that suggested he might have overheard their little conversation. Well done you three. That brings our number of missions complete to 26. If we hurry back, the Hokage might have another to give us. The day is yet young. Three resigned nods met him, and he frowned slightly beneath the mask. Across town the four stood in front of a long desk, occupied by numerous tomes and scrolls, attended to by the Sandaime, Iruka, and a number of other ninja, presumably of Chonin rank. Iruka looked over Kakashi's report, nodding to himself as village leader shuffled scrolls around. As always, he consulted the D rank list that most Shinan teams handled. He blinked, though, and looked up at a restless-looking Naruto and a particularly surly Sasuke. Even Hinata looked more uncomfortable than usual. Something wrong? He asked calmly, although the answer to his question could be seen a mile away. Hokage-sama, Naruto began carefully, shifting his weight subconsciously and glancing at Iruka a bit guiltily. D-rank missions are important, I know, but is there something else we might be able to do? The Sandaime looked to Kakashi for a moment, though the silver-haired man looked disinterested, and even innocent. No disrespect meant, Sasuke continued, though he didn't seem very reverent, but D-rank missions are designed to build our teamwork while getting small tasks done in the process, correct? A small smile had appeared on the old man's lips, and he nodded. I think Kakashi can vouch for our teamwork, and Shinan are allowed to do C-rank missions as well. Are you saying that you're ready for a C-rank mission? The question was offered mildly, but it carried with it an unspoken weight that they all understood. C-rank missions weren't necessarily high on the threat scale, but they did carry some possibility of danger. His calm, calculating eyes fell on Kakashi, who shrugged before responding for them. They did pass my test with flying colors, Hokage-sama. They have also completed a remarkable number of D-rank missions in only 2 weeks' time. I don't think a C-rank assignment should be out of the question. I agree, came the congenial response, as if this had been planned from the beginning. I have been looking for the right team to assign this mission anyway. It is a C-rank escort mission. A bridge builder from the Wave Country desires protection. Here is the briefing. Kakashi stepped forward to accept the small scroll, bowing slightly as he did. Nearby Iruka tried to seem busy, but he was absolutely glowing. You will leave in the morning for the Wave Country. Make sure you are all prepared for a long mission. And get plenty of rest. It was difficult for Naruto to keep in his excitement as they bowed and departed, and even Sasuke's smirk seemed more pleased than usual. Hinata's brow was knitted in worry as she walked a pace behind her friends, though aside from the concern she did not appear reluctant. If anything, the girl showed some resolve. Outside, Kakashi unraveled the scroll and went over the details of the mission. All three listened intently until he was finished. Alright you three, you heard the Hokage. Get your supplies together, everything from ninja tools to several days' rations. Meet at the front gates at 7 a.m. sharp. Understood? They all nodded again, and he concluded the orders as they exited the building. Good. Dismissed. Sasuke bid his allies farewell as he moved off to his apartment to prepare, leaving Naruto and Hinata to walk down the street towards Iruka's home. They were silent for a time, the blonde boy's exuberance fading slowly as he began to notice his friend's apprehension. It would be erroneous to think that he was in tune with her enough to tell how she was feeling, but living in close quarters for a while, with some pointers from Iruka, had allowed him to catch on to hints quicker. What's wrong, Hinata? He asked, keeping his voice casual and chipper. To his surprise, her cheeks didn't flush, no fidgeting occurred, and she didn't start stammering. Instead, Hinata was biting lightly at her lower lip, silent as they walked towards their lengthening shadows. A sidelong glance revealed only that she was nervous, reluctant to speak, as if for fear that words might break something fragile, or open a door through which frightening prospects lay. Naruto-kun, Hinata began cautiously, index fingers moving to press together. Are you sure about this mission? She appeared to wince very slightly, as if it had been painful to get the words out. It was difficult enough for the girl to express herself, and more than just questioning her friends, she was afraid to discourage Naruto especially. The blonde boy thought about it for a long moment. Iruka had chided him about impulsive answers for years, encouraging him to think carefully in conversation, especially when it involved those close to him. Hinata looked like she was being careful with her words, so he had to do the same. Naruto scrunched up his features slightly, an action that normally elicited a blush from Hinata, for whatever reason. He laced his fingers behind his head as they walked, considering for a full minute before offering a response. I don't think Kakashi-sensei would vouch for us unless he really thought we were ready. You, me, and Sasuke have been training together for years, so it makes sense I guess. The Hokage and Kakashi trust us enough to do a C-rank mission. And I trust you and Sasuke. I'm as sure as I can be, he finished a bit lamely, casting somewhat of an apologetic grin at his friend. What about you, Hinata-chan? He continued, keeping in mind more of Iruka's advice about considering other people's thoughts and feelings. And what? Hinata began, still chewing absently at her lower lip. I trust you and Sasuke too. I'm just. And what? She seemed to have trouble with the words, struggling for a moment before it all came out in a rush. I'm afraid that one of you will get hurt, or of something going wrong. I'm scared that I'll hold you back or get in the way, maybe even put the team in danger or cause somebody to be harmed, or worse. You and Sasuke are always strong and confident. I don't want to hold anyone back, and I don't want anybody put in danger because of me. And what? She trailed off at that, her cheeks flushed now in shame, eyes on the ground. Tears had sprung unbidden to the corners of her eyes, though they stubbornly refused to fall. Her fingers were white as they pressed together subconsciously. It was a long, painful moment before Naruto responded. After we became Junon, Iruka Sensei told me that we'd be going on missions together. Naruto started as they rounded a corner, bringing their shared apartment into view. He said that eventually we'd be sent on dangerous missions, and that it was possible that we could die on them. And quad. Hinata didn't look up, but seemed like she wanted to voice some kind of protest in response. He continued before she could, voice full of assurance and cheer. I know that, but I trust you and Sasuke. I know you'll do your best to keep us safe and accomplish the mission. And we'll do the same. And quad. On impulse he reached over and caught her pinky finger with his, winking and giving it a little squeeze. You're never going to hold us back, Hinata-chan, I promise. Have a little more faith in yourself. I know Sasuke and I have plenty of confidence in you too. And quad. He gave another of his patented smiles and lowered his hand, though it proved to still be attached to Hinata's. The girl, while as red as she possibly could be, was holding on tight. They walked onward in silence for a moment, and Naruto felt some heat rising to his cheeks as he realized they were sort of hand in hand. Well, finger in finger, anyway. But some tension seemed to release from Hinata's shoulders as they continued, and she only had to wipe a single threatening tear away. She nodded slowly but firmly after a time, her face still approximately the same color as a ripe tomato. Thank you, Naruto-kun, she said finally, so quiet he nearly missed it. The blonde boy scratched at the back of his head awkwardly, but managed a broad grin despite himself. Before he could think of a response, however, Iruka came around the corner a few meters behind them. Oh hey Naruto, Hinata, I wanted to help you two pack for Iruka's voice broke off as he focused on them, blinking at the pair from several paces back. They both spun at the same time, hands snapping back as if shocked by a sudden surge of electricity. The slowly spreading smirk on their old teacher's face proved that they had been too slow. However, this will be your first long mission, so I wanted to make sure you two have everything you need, he continued nonchalantly, as if he had seen nothing. Naruto's sheepish grin did little to hide the color in his features, nearly matching Hinata's brilliant hue. They both nodded vigorously and fell in next to Iruka, glancing at one another furtively as the Chunin continued on about the various tools and supplies they should consider taking. Ready to set out? Kakashi addressed his team in front of Konoha's gate a few minutes after the agreed upon time. To all three Genin's surprise, their instructor had showed up early, almost the same time they had. After quickly checking their equipment and explaining the mission, they now stood waiting for their client to arrive. Now remember, danger isn't very likely on this mission even if it is C rank, but it is possible. It'll take us 2 days to get to Wave Country at a pace Tazuna can keep, so keep alert. We'll rotate positions frequently, but for the start Hinata will take point. Naruto and Sasuke stay on either side of Tazuna, and I'll bring up the rear. And quad. Each of them nodded once in affirmation, just as an old man wearing a Sandogasa approached. He also appeared to be drunk. Didn't I hire ninjas to escort me? The bespectacled old man hiccuped roughly, taking another long swig from a brown bottle that smelled strongly of alcohol. These are a bunch of kids. And quad. He stopped to look them over, a dubious expression plastered on his face. This is Team 7, Tazuna-san. I assure you they are all qualified ninja. This is Naruto, Hinata, and Sasuke. Team, this is our client, Tazuna, a bridge builder from the Wave Country. And quad. All three nodded politely, though with varied expressions. Naruto seemed annoyed. Sasuke appeared as apathetic as usual, though with a touch of disdain in his eyes. Hinata was despondent, averting her gaze and looking at the ground. Naruto nudged her lightly, flashing a brief smile that she returned feebly. Ah whatever, just don't cause me any trouble, kids. And quad. Tazuna chortled to himself and took another drink, turning without further conversation to start trundling down the road out of the town. Kakashi followed immediately, cocking his head towards the man to indicate that it was time to leave. After a shared doubtful look, Team 7 assumed their positions and began their mission. At Kakashi's request, Hinata activated her Byakugan every kilometer or so, scanning far ahead just in case. Her allies stayed alert at their stations, eyes scanning the trees on either side calmly. More than one person had already assured them that there was little chance of obstruction, let alone from anything more dangerous than a bandit. Kakashi seemed bored as always, his one visible eye half lidded as he plodded forward behind the troop. Scenery came and went as they passed through glades, over rivers, and intersected other roads. Around midday, after a brief break, they had shuffled positions and Naruto now set the pace out front, keeping closer watch than he had previously. Sasuke walked on Tazuna's left, Hinata matching his steps on the opposite side. Only Kakashi glanced aside as they passed a stray puddle, his expression unchanged though causing Sasuke to take note of it as well. It seemed odd to the Uchiha that a puddle would be in the middle of the road on a sunny afternoon, especially when it hadn't rained in a while. But their instructor seemed uninterested, so he turned his attention back to the forest. Seconds later there was a violent metallic clinking, accompanied by an intense killer intent. All three genin pivoted simultaneously, each with a kunai in hand as if it had appeared there of its own will. But they were too slow. Kakashi's eye was wide in surprise as barbed chains pulled tight about him, their lengths attached to two cloaked ninja that had apparently come out of thin air. The barbs of the chains dug in viciously as the pair of assassins chanted together. First one, they snarled. Faster than any of them could blink, the lengths of metal retracted to their wielders. The result was lost in a cloud of mayhem and gore, what was left of Kakashi falling to the ground and kicking up a haze of dust and dirt as the chains ripped cleanly through the jounin. 4 pairs of eyes were wide in shock. It had happened so fast. Tazuna looked like he might be sick. Sasuke cursed and grit his teeth, preparing for a fight. Hinata's horrified gasp was replaced quickly with rapid footsteps, placing her between the two ninja and the bridge builder. Fear threatened to take hold of her, but she forced it away. As quickly as the attackers had appeared, they blurred in movement, seeming to vanish from sight. Second one. And quat. The echo came immediately behind Naruto, who had been caught outside of the group at his position on point. Even as he turned he knew it wouldn't be fast enough. Each of the assassins raised a clawed hand, now a mere meter away, the vicious links attaching them already threatening to encircle him. Naruto grit his teeth, still mid-spin, forcing himself down towards the ground in an attempt to flatten and avoid the weapons. Thankfully, his teammates had recovered. A shuriken ripped through the air, catching the chain in its flight and pinning it to a nearby tree. Sasuke had leapt towards Naruto the moment the attackers had vanished, sensing the weak point and reacting precisely. A kunai followed hot on the shuriken's tail, striking the tree trunk through the center of the first weapon and securing the chain tight to the tree. The Uchiha landed a breath later, striking out at both attackers with vicious kicks and knocking them both off balance towards Naruto, who didn't miss a beat. The blonde boy turned his fall into a sidelong roll towards one of the attackers, catching him off guard with a flurry of blows and slashes from the kunai. But his opponent was good. It was apparent that the enemy was at least of Chunin level, and the vicious-looking claws they wore indicated that they were close-quarters combat specialists. After surprising the man with a few solid blows and some minor slashes, he caught up and began trading blows evenly. Naruto, like his companions, may have been fairly ahead of their years in taijutsu, but the assassin likely had years of experience in his trade. Blood sprayed from the back of Naruto's hand as a claw raked it, forcing him to drop the kunai and leap back. An odd tingling sensation rose immediately from the wounded hand, eliciting a curse from the genin. Poison! Naruto called to his allies before re-engaging his foe. His only real hope was to survive and keep the assassin from getting to the others, praying that Sasuke and Hinata could handle the other and come to assist after. As soon as Sasuke had pinned their weapons, the other attacker split off, rushing Tazuna with claws bared. Hinata stood ready in her Juken stance, bloodline activated and her features set in determination. Sasuke blurred next to the oncoming foe, sweeping a leg in an attempt to trip him up. The enemy ninja leapt, though the kick caught his right leg, throwing the jump off course. Hinata was ready. 8 divination signs, 64 palms, she cried, eyes narrowing in concentration. Thanks to Sasuke's actions her attacker had slowed and been forced to jump too high, just within reach of the young Hyuga. 2 strikes, she murmured, hands flying as she shifted forward to intercept the oncoming ninja. Her first 2 blows sparked tiny blue flames on his chest and stopped him cold, but she didn't let up to make sure her aim was on. 4 strikes, she continued methodically, limbs moving faster with each new set. 8 strikes, 16 strikes. And quat. Hinata ground her teeth, the muscles in her arms screaming in protest as her speed reached its peak, the power in each blow increasing exponentially. 32 strikes. And quat. Her attacker coughed and staggered back, a small amount of blood spattering through his black cloth mask. Halfway through her series Hinata faltered, stumbling back and breathing heavily. Her arms shook violently, the strain of less than half of the ability apparent in her whole body. The assassin growled, dropping to one knee and breathing even more heavily than the girl. He reached into his belt pouch, withdrawing 2 small spheres, preparing to cast them at the ground to throw up a smoke screen. But he never got the chance. Kakashi was suddenly just there, holding Naruto's attacker limp in one arm and his accomplice's neck in the other. He looked calm as ever, though there was an undertone of anger in his eyes that was felt more than it was seen. "Well done, you three," he stated dryly, a bit of pride showing through his curtness. Hinata collapsed onto her knees, still shaking but overjoyed and relieved to see their teacher unharmed. Sasuke rose from his crouch, trying to seem aloof but succeeding only to a degree. He, like his friend, was thankful as well. "Naruto, are you alright?" It was these words that drew their attention to the blonde boy, laying sprawled on his back where he had been engaged in combat. Hinata gasped and tried to stand too quickly, falling back but managing to call to her friend. "I'm fine," Naruto sighed, sitting up slowly and holding his head with his uninjured hand. "I just moved too much after I got hit, had to cut out the poison. And quat." It was then that they noted a sizable gouge taken out of the back of his hand and the bloody kunai sitting next to him. As soon as Kakashi had intervened, he had sliced open his own hand, allowing it to bleed freely for a time to get the poison out. The wound, however, already appeared to be closing on its own, skin rapidly stitching itself together under the cover of blood. He stood slowly, wobbling only slightly as he made his way to the rest. Aside from appearing to be a bit pale, Naruto seemed as well as he claimed. "Quick thinking, though you should sit down for a while. Doubtless some of the poison circulated through you during the conflict, and I didn't bring any antidotes along." "Sasuke, excellent reaction time. You saved Naruto's life. Hinata, you acted properly protecting Tazuna, and what's more, you incapacitated a skilled enemy impressively. Naruto, you were right to engage your target to keep him away from the others. All in all, excellent work. Now," he continued, turning his hard stare towards the bridge builder, "I think we need to have a talk. And quat." It took a few minutes for Kakashi to get the assassins tied up and awake, allowing time for Hinata and Naruto to recover. Sasuke bandaged his friend's wounded hand while they spoke. "Thanks for the help, Sasuke," Naruto said with a sigh, wincing once as the cloth tightened around his hand. The Uchiha shook his head, smirking slightly. "I only distracted them long enough for you two to take them out. I dunno if you saw what Hinata did to that guy, but it was pretty incredible." "What was that anyway?" Hinata sat fidgeting nearby, cheeks colored at the relatively minor praise. It's a technique designed to shut down all of the tenketsu points on a person's body, and also deal a good amount of physical damage. And quat. She blinked up at her friends, looking between them and wondering why they looked so stunned. But I didn't do it right," she continued dully, color fading from her face again. "I couldn't even get halfway through it. And quat. Hinata, do you realize how fast you were moving?" Sasuke asked bluntly, tying off Naruto's bandage as he spoke. "If I heard you correctly, you just shut off 64 of his tenketsu, and simultaneously drove him back with a force. Even if you didn't complete it, it was still damn impressive. And quat. I was only able to do it with your help," she responded modestly, though flushed again and bowed her head. "Are you okay, Naruto-kun?" The blonde boy had been smirking between the two of them, though tried to hide it as Hinata turned towards him, her milky eyes showing concern. "Yeah, I'm alright. That guy was pretty tough, but I kept up okay, I think. Just wasn't careful enough to avoid his claws, I guess. I think the poison's out of my system, though. And quat." He stood slowly to emphasize the point, offering a hand to Hinata as he did. She took it with a nod, trying not to blush more than she already was. Kakashi was just standing back from the tree that now held the assassins hostage. "Tazuna-san," Kakashi began slowly, eyes staying fixed on the two attackers. "Do you know why I allowed everyone present to believe I had been killed?" Tazuna shook his head, a bead of sweat making its way slowly down from his temple. "I wanted to see what they were after. Any jounin worth his salt would have noticed the puddle they were concealed within. It hasn't rained in days. And quat." The two prisoners glowered and growled, though quieted at a hard look from their captor. "These two are the demon brothers, Chunin-level ninja from the hidden mist. And quat." Kakashi turned towards Tazuna now, his eye boring a hole through the man. "Is there a reason these two were after you?" And quat. I'm not sure what you mean," the bridge builder responded, voice a little too high to be sincere. "I think you do," Kakashi returned flatly. "You hired us for a C-rank mission. If we had known you were being pursued by other ninjas, this would have been at least a B-rank mission, and an expensive one at that. You might have a good reason for withholding information, but if it puts my team in danger, then I have no choice but to call off this mission. And quat. "Wait, please." A desperate edge in the old man's voice made Kakashi stop after he had turned away. The jounin glanced back, raising an eyebrow in question. "You're right," he sighed, casting a look towards the assassins. "My country is poor, and we couldn't afford to pay for a high-ranking mission. I didn't think Gato would go this far, but in what? Gato? Kakashi interrupted, blinking several times as he turned to face Tazuna again. The billionaire and president of the Gato company ? In what? The one and only, Tazuna replied bitterly. He came to our lands about a year ago, and has been a terror ever since. He employs gangs and ninjas to curb lands to his will, and he's after me now because of the bridge I'm building to the mainland. In what? Anyo, sir? Hinata ventured cautiously, looking anxious. Why is a bridge such a threat to Gato? Attempts on your life seem extreme for such a thing. In what? In a nutshell, Gato controls the shipping industry. That's how he got rich in the first place. If our country gained access to the mainland by means other than ships, it would threaten his hold on our nation. That's why I needed to make sure I was protected. Without me, the bridge can't be completed, and with such pressures already in place, no one else will step forward to continue the project. It may seem dramatic, but without me our country may shrivel and die, sucked dry by Gato's greed and malice. In what? A long minute passed after the old man's speech, his dark eyes pleading as they went to each of them in turn. I know what I did was wrong, but I had no choice, for the sake of my village, for the sake of my family. In what? We're not unsympathetic, Kakashi sighed, a hand lifting back to rub at the back of his neck. But the fact remains that you put my team, 3 genins, newly promoted ninjas, in danger because of your deceit. I don't have a choice but to terminate the mission. We can protect you and bring you back to the village, but from there you'll have to put in a proper request. In what? Sensei, his village can't afford to pay the fee. In what? It was Naruto's turn to speak now. He had been listening to the exchange, flexing his hand as he considered the situation. Iruka Sensei always said that a ninja should always help when somebody deserving is in need. I don't want to just leave his village to that jerk Gato, do you? Hinata looked for a moment at Naruto, biting at her lower lip, before she turned and nodded her agreement to Kakashi. I agree with Naruto, but only if he's going to be straight with us from here on out. I don't want any more surprises like that, Sasuke interjected coolly. Kakashi looked intently from one of his students to the other, considering their words before sighing again. You 3 know the kind of danger this mission now offers. These 2 may have been Chunin level, but they were experienced assassins. Seeing more of them, or even a Jounin wouldn't be out of the question. You're still willing to go on? It took a little longer than it might normally for them to respond, but 3 nods of affirmation came quickly enough. He sighed again. Tazuna, wait with them. I'm going to have a talk with our new friends here. In what? Without waiting for a reply, Kakashi turned, vanishing in a cloud of white smoke, the 2 captive ninja mysteriously gone with him. Well, may as well go over the recap like we would in training, Sasuke started after a moment, plopping down to wait for Kakashi. Hinata, you first. You had a better view of Naruto and I during the initial attack. In what? On his cue the other 2 sank to the ground, facing one another with a good amount of room between. Like Kakashi Sensei said, your reaction was what saved us. Your aim was perfect as usual, but your jump was off a little. If you had landed a little in front of them instead of on their arms, you could have kicked them back and off balance without sacrificing your own positioning, and maybe engaged the other before he could get to Tazuna. In what? Despite her usual demure self, this was something Hinata had gotten used to from training with her friends. They could all offer one another constructive criticism and not worry about feeling bad for it. She couldn't help the slight blush as she addressed Naruto. However, Naruto-kun, I think Sasuke realized it faster than either of us that you were the next target after Kakashi Sensei. If you had picked it out quicker you may have been able to avoid the attack without Sasuke's help. But you recovered well, and like he said you were right to engage and keep the one away from us. Just be a little more cautious of what kind of weapons your opponent is using. In what? Naruto and Sasuke both nodded at the appropriate parts, taking in their friends' comments before discussing between themselves briefly. Guess we were all on the same page, Naruto said with a small grin, turning to Hinata and shoving her shoulder lightly. You're the only one who did everything perfect. In what? He had expected her to flush and deny it, but she simply shook her head. If I had completed the technique he wouldn't have been able to move at all, and we could have helped you. Well, Sasuke could have. Because of me, Kakashi Sensei had to come back in to save us. And what? She trailed off, shoulders rolling very slightly in a shrug. I should have been able to do it. In what? Young lady, I'm not sure what you did, but it was the most impressive thing I've ever seen. Not only did you remain calm in that situation, but you protected me, and with the finesse of one far beyond your age. In what? Hinata blinked up at the old man that had addressed her, his broad smile proof that he had reassessed his opinion of the trio. You should be proud. In what? Kazuna-san is right, Hinata, Sasuke agreed. If you really want some criticism all I can give is that you should practice that more. Your body obviously isn't used to it, and I've never seen anything like that when we spar. I'm sure if you put some work into it you'd be able to master it before long. You're faster than either of us, so I bet it's just a matter of conditioning so your muscles can handle the stress. In what? The Hyuga girl looked from one of her friends to the other, and up to Tazuna, before finally allowing herself a small smile, ducking her head before anybody could see the red creeping into her cheeks. Thankfully, Kakashi returned shortly thereafter, saving her from the embarrassment. They didn't betray much. All I could learn was that there are more of them in whatever organization they belong to, or maybe just other mercenaries Gato has hired. And quad. None of them asked what happened to the assassins after the questioning. Kazuna-san, as Sasuke said, if we are to continue this mission you will need to share any and all information you have with us. Is there anything else we should know before we continue? And quad. Only that we will be on our own. Gato's gang has the town beaten down, and nobody dares challenge his authority. I don't know any specifics about who he's hired, aside from the fact that he's contracted ninjas to kill me. And quad. Alright, Naruto, Sasuke, Hinata, I'm upgrading this mission to high B rank as of now. You are to be combat ready at all times. Hinata will stay on point. Activate your Byakugan every 5 minutes to scan ahead and all around us. At the first sign of danger, form up around Tazuna in the swastika formation. I will handle any threats from here on out, understood? A sharp chorus of affirmation from Team 7 elicited a nod from Kakashi. Good, let's move out. And quad. We're sharing a tent? Naruto had a look on his face that was somewhere between incredulous and embarrassed. Kakashi, who had just finished delivering the news, blinked up at the boy quizzically before shaking his head and returning to erecting his own tent. Didn't they tell you when you were at the academy? A ninja is a ninja. Male or female makes little difference in the field, and most times you won't have the luxury of separate accommodations anyway. You three are small enough to share a tent between you, and besides, don't you live with Hinata already? Kakashi's mask covered his mischievous smirk. As far as he was concerned they were far too young to worry about in the first place, but there was no harm in teasing for something the boy wouldn't understand. As expected, more color rose in Naruto's features. Well yeah, but we don't sleep in the same room, he muttered, turning away and walking back to his friends. He shrugged and shifted back and forth on his feet before speaking, trying not to look as uncomfortable as he felt. Kakashi says we have to share a tent. He only brought 2. And quad. They both blinked back at him, though Sasuke didn't seem perturbed. Hinata, though, traversed the color spectrum more rapidly than he thought was possible. Sasuke and I can just sleep outside. There's plenty of trees around. Right, Sasuke? The Uchiha boy shrugged and nodded, turning back to finish putting up their tent. And no, Hinata said quickly, waving her hands in front of her. It's alright, really? I mean, we've been friends for years, it's not a big deal. And quad. She trailed off lamely, more red rising to her cheeks and ears. Naruto looked at her curiously for a moment, then shrugged, scratching at the back of his neck. Alright, if you say so. Here, let me help Sasuke. And quad. He rushed to the opposite side of the tent, both legitimately to help his friend and also for an excuse to get away from the awkward conversation. Iruka had gone over some things with him over the years, including certain behavior that was expected with girls. It was only recently that he had started to notice that Hinata was, in fact, female. Like she said, they had been friends since childhood, and it had never mattered before. Less than an hour later they sat in a circle around a campfire, the flames set low in a dugout hole. Kakashi was reading one of his little books while his team cleaned and sharpened the equipment that had been used that day. A small boar had been caught for the night's meal and now sat on a spit over the fire. You three never told me you could cook, Kakashi mused, not looking up from his reading. I expected Hinata to have been taught at some point, but not you 2. And quad. Iruka Sensei said I should learn some simple stuff for missions, and in case he wasn't home. Most of it is just seasoning, though, like the rub for this one, Naruto responded modestly, showing Kakashi the small bag of herbs and salts he had ground and used to season the meat. I made this one before we left. And quad. I've lived alone for a while, Sasuke said evenly, leaning back from a handful of wild vegetables he had finished chopping. He slid a portion of each onto 5 plates while Hinata began cutting from the spit, making sure each dish had a sizable chunk or 2 of meat before passing them to Kakashi and Tazuna. I almost feel like this is cheating, having 3 long-time friends on the same team. They even cook using teamwork. Kakashi shook his head and thanked Hinata before settling down to eat. All 3 had stopped questioning how the Jounin managed to eat without them ever seeing his face. Sometimes his food just vanished, as if he had employed his ninja training in eating just as well as in combat. Other times it disappeared bit by bit, presumably when absolutely nobody was looking his way. Tonight was the latter method. Damn good, Tazuna praised through a mouthful of pork, grinning at the 3 Jounin and shaking his head. I was wrong about you 3, and I apologize for what I said before. I've seen how you handle yourselves in a fight, and now I'm very glad to say I've seen how you can cook. He barked out a raucous laugh before tearing off another piece of meat. Their reaction to his words was as expected. Naruto beamed and smiled broadly, Sasuke shrugged and sipped water from a canteen, and Hinata ducked her head. We'll be on the move again by dawn. And quad. Kakashi's voice came to them through the light tent fabric, ripples spreading from where he flicked the material from the outside. Naruto, Sasuke, and Hinata were inside, setting out bedrolls and preparing to sleep. We need to meet Tazuna's contact at 9 a.m. so that he can escort us across the strait to Wave Country. No dawdling in the morning. And quat. Moments later the glow of the campfire faded in a torrent of hissing, followed shortly by the sound of earth shifting to swallow up the pit. Naruto yawned and crawled onto the center roll, shrugging out of his sleeveless coat and folding it where his head would be to act as a pillow. After slipping out of his dark yakitabi, something Iruka had encouraged him to pick up after Naruto had voiced his dislike for sandals, he settled on his makeshift bed, lifting a hand to his shirt collar before stopping abruptly. He glanced sideways at Hinata, who was turned towards the entrance of their tent removing her footwear. He shrugged to himself then, quickly slipping out of the gray t-shirt. It's hot, and Hinata won't care. Sasuke and I have trained without shirts before. Hinata mimicked her friend, folding and turning to put down her coat, something that was getting all too warm to be wearing this time of year. She turned to move to the head of her bedroll and froze, blinking at Naruto and Sasuke. They had both casually removed their shirts while she had been turned. Sasuke lay already dozing on his side, back to the two of them. Naruto hadn't yet fallen asleep, but he was lying on his back, eyes half-lidded and muttering something about ramen. She sat there for a moment, color rising in her face for the umpteenth time that night, before shaking her head and forcing the heat away. No different than training, she said to herself again and again as she lay down. But it wasn't the same, for some reason. Even as her friends quickly succumbed to sleep, she stayed awake for a time, trying to reason out thoughts and feelings until exhaustion finally won over. Naruto stifled a yawn as they walked, keeping his eyes on the woods and doing his best not to think about that morning. He had woken first and blinked his eyes open mere centimeters from Hinata's face. It had been all he could do to stay quiet and slowly sit back and up. The experience, coupled with the previous night's awkward conversation, had given him enough thought to muddle through the whole morning. It was something he had resigned to talk to Iruka about when they returned. As Kakashi had promised, they arrived at the meeting point just before 9. Trees thinned out to reveal a narrow strand of beach, though they could see only a few meters through the thick fog coming off of the sea beyond. A man stood on the shore next to a small wooden boat, its bow half buried in the sand. Without wasting any time they made hasty introductions and were aboard, shoving off from the land and delving into the curtain of mist. The short journey across the channel was uneventful, save for the appearance of the bridge looming out of the haze above them. Is that your bridge, Tazuna-san? Naruto asked curiously, eyes a little wide in wonder. It was enough that the youth, like his friends, had never been allowed outside of the village. Such structures were awe-inspiring. Aye, that's it. That's our village's hopes and dreams. And quat. No further conversation was to be had. The fog felt ominous. In a way, it held the same effect as a dark room, where people whispered on instinct even when there might not be a reason to. It was like a living entity, one that demanded a respectful silence. The whiteness broke suddenly as they entered a low tunnel, emerging on the other side to clear skies and open blue water into what seemed like an artificial lagoon. Their guide docked the boat at a nearby wooden platform, ushering them off quickly and looking around nervously. Thank you, Tazuna said solemnly, nodding to the man. His only response was a curt nod, more glances in around, and the roar of the engine starting as he peeled away from the dock. As you can see, the old man continued dryly, turning towards the path that ran off into the woods. People are scared to even be seen with me. Can't blame them, though. Gato's got the whole village scared. And quat. That'll change once we're through, Naruto stated confidently, grinning from Tazuna's side. The words earned him a smirk from their client. Come on, let's get you back home, mister. The sooner we get back the sooner that jerk Gato will get what's coming to him. And quat. Tazuna couldn't help but chuckle at the boy's assurance, shaking his head but starting down the road without further encouragement. Several kilometers of walking later Hinata stopped, raising a small fist in the air to signal a halt. Kakashi appeared next to her, speaking quietly. What is it? He murmured, his eyes scanning the trees in the direction the girl was looking. Her Byakugan was active and she's staring intently ahead. There's somebody in the trees ahead, maybe 300 meters ahead. No, 325 meters. I can't make out many details, but he's tall, and has a huge sword on his back that's longer than he is. And quat. Sasuke and Naruto tensed at the same time, drawing out their kunai. Kakashi nodded and stepped in front of Hinata. Good work, he said quietly. Fall back to protect Tazuna. I'll handle him. And quat. She nodded and fell in with her team in the swastika formation, a kunai of her own already in hand. Meanwhile Kakashi proceeded at the same pace, eyes ahead and taking mental note of where the enemy was. Inform me if he moves. And quat. The party proceeded 300 meters before Hinata spoke again, a rapid whisper to their instructor. He's coming this way, though I don't think he's heading towards us. He should appear 10 meters ahead of us. And quat. As if on cue, a form blurred into their path, blocking their advance. The man that now stood before them was tall indeed. He wore no shirt, only pinstripe trousers held up by modified suspenders. Black and white leg and arm warmers adorned each limb, and bandages covered most of his face. Kakashi cocked his head to the side, feigning calm as he spread his hands to his sides. "Momochi Zabuza, eh?" Kakashi drawled, still apparently relaxed and bored. "Last I heard you were exiled from the hidden mist and put in their bingo book. Failed coups will do that, I hear. Quad. Hatake Kakashi, the Leaf's infamous copy ninja. Your party's packing quite the ocular punch. An Uchiha and a Hyuga? Unless the boy just likes the old clan symbol. Quad. Zabuza matched his adversary's posture, feigning nonchalance while every muscle in his body was poised for action. "I didn't even bother with an ambush. The girl would have warned you anyway. Any chance you'll want to make this easy and just hand the old man over? And Quad. Tempting offer, but no thanks," Kakashi responded coolly, hand moving lazily to lift his forehead protector from the always hidden eye. "You three protect Tazuna. I'll handle him. And Quad. They were already set in balanced combat stances, though each watched their teacher with interest. None of them had ever seen that eye, and had never thought to ask why it was hidden. Zabuza sighed and shrugged, the motion loosening the massive blade that hung on his back. "As you wish, but don't think I'm going to let you use your Sharingan that easily. And Quad. A noise escaped Sasuke's lips, something between a gasp and a growl. But there was little time to discuss the cause of his unrest. Zabuza vanished and reappeared several meters back from his starting point, standing atop a small river and channeling his chakra. In seconds a thick mist rose from their surroundings, coating the air even thicker than the fog covering the sea. Kakashi was all but lost from sight, only his outline remaining visible. And then they felt it. Sweat beaded almost immediately on the three Jinan and Tazuna alike, and it was not a result of heat or condensation. The air was thick with killing intent unlike any they had ever felt, radiating from Kakashi and seeming to emanate from the mist around them. This man was a Jounin, and on a whole other level than the Demon Brothers. He had initiated an assault by himself without even hesitating, and he moved with a speed that could rival Kakashi's. This was something entirely out of their league, and they knew it. He can appear anywhere in this mist, and in complete silence. Don't let your guard down for an instant. And Quad. Kakashi's voice sounded slightly muffled from the mist, but they understood enough to stiffen and continue glancing around warily. Without warning Hinata spun, lashing out behind them with her kunai. Tazuna had been the only one just behind them, but in less time than a blink the new assassin had appeared in the narrow opening, heavy blade ready to strike down all four at once. The kunoichi had reacted first, however, slicing from Zabuza's hip to his shoulder in one fluid movement. Kakashi was there in a heartbeat, but already the form had melted into a puddle of water. "Water clone," Kakashi muttered, glancing down to Hinata, who was breathing harder than she ought to be. "Calm down," he said with what must have been a reassuring smile. "I won't let anything happen to any of." A thick metal blade cut through his torso mid-sentence, slicing the silver-haired Jounin in half and preventing him from finishing the sentence. Permanently, or so the horrified Jinan thought. More water splashed onto the ground where Kakashi's body had been. The real one now stood just behind the sword's wielder, kunai's tip pressed against Zabuza's back just below the left set of floating ribs. "Don't move," he said calmly, digging the blade in a little further. "Hey, pretty good Kakashi. But you'll need to do more than copy techniques to beat me. And Quad." Kakashi dropped to the ground before Zabuza had finished speaking, his giant sword sweeping over his head and taking off a few silver hairs. But the missing nin was fast. In an instant he had spun, a whirling kick striking Kakashi in the jaw. The Sharingan user careened backwards, gritting his teeth just before hitting the water beyond the road. "I'll be right back, kids," Zabuza growled, a maniacal grin on the man's face. Then he blurred and was atop the water again, hands moving so fast that they could hardly make out the hand signs. "Suitin, water prison!" And Quad. The technique landed just as Kakashi surfaced. A cascade of swirling water closed on him, capturing and immobilizing the Konoha Jounin. Without hesitation Kakashi shouted to his team, words a little distorted but clearly audible. "Take Tazuna and run." All three of his Jinan stood there, stunned and blinking. Had they really seen it? Had Kakashi been captured right in front of their eyes after such a brief yet impressive exchange? He growled and shouted again as Zabuza made a hand sign with one hand. The other emerged in the water prison. "He's stronger than I thought. Get away now before." And Quad. "No." Naruto's retort may have been offered louder than necessary, but it got the message across. Kakashi balked and blinked, actions mimicked by Zabuza. "We're not leaving an ally behind," Sasuke interjected, trying to stay calm despite the all too reasonable fear of death. Hinata could only nod, put on her best determined look, which looked all too pale. "No?" the Miss Ninja asked, amused. "Kakashi, you didn't teach your students very well. Mizu Bunshin no Jutsu." And Quad. A single copy of Zabuza formed between him and the party of four, eyes turned up in what must have been a grin behind that mask. The clone took over speaking now. "I've already captured Kakashi. I hope you realize I can crush you before you take in your next breath. And quote. None of them seemed to be paying him much attention. Hinata, stay with Tazuna, Naruto muttered out of the corner of his mouth, quiet enough for only his allies to hear. I'll leave a few clones too. Sasuke, pattern D, but use yourself, and ignore his clone. We have to break him away from the prison or none of us are getting out of here alive. And quote. Sasuke nodded, drawing out 2 fists of shuriken before his friend had even named the plan. The blonde boy faced Zabuza defiantly then, forming the clone seal and roaring, Tajuu Kage Bunshin no Jutsu and quote. Hinata blinked at the smoke surrounding the small veil. She had seen Naruto perform his clone technique many times, but she had never heard him add that prefix along with it. And now she knew why. A veritable horde of Narutos now stood in every available space, some even alighting on nearby trees for the lack of space. There had to have been nearly 100 of them, maybe more, every one of them poised with a kunai and sneering at Zabuza. But her eyes showed her more than just that. Her Byakugan could see a person's chakra circulatory system, as well as the chakra inside of it. While there were an incredible number of clones, they all had only a very small amount of chakra, which meant that Naruto himself had spent nearly his whole reserve. From observation she knew that he had more chakra than anybody she had seen, even more than Kakashi, and the fact that he had been able to split the stores between so many and still stand was both incredible and frightening. Naruto, she gasped softly, you can't. And quote. I'm fine, he responded roughly. I need to give Sasuke the best distraction I can. And quote. Hinata bit her lip hard enough to draw blood and looked away, focusing again on Zabuza as 5 clones moved in close beside her. Let's go, he shouted, charging forward in a wave of battle cries. Even Zabuza seemed taken aback for a moment. He couldn't look in any direction without seeing a dozen blonde kids charging towards him, dark coats billowing behind them and all brandishing weaponry. Ha, impressive, but my sword was made for. And quote. He blinked, watching 2 fists of shuriken fly out of the horde and straight past the clone. Brats, he muttered, his free arm moving in a blur to deflect each and every projectile. Meanwhile the clone had taken to warding off the swarm, broad blade cutting swathes through the crowd, taking out 4 or 5 with each swing and sparring one-handed with any that managed to get past. Kakashi watched, helpless to act. It was chaos from his point of view. Narutos were shouting from every direction, each one acting on its own to take down Zabuza's clone and get past him. The ranks were thinning quickly, but he knew what their plan was. They had a chance. A Fuma shuriken whirred out of the din, on course to cut the real Zabuza down. He rolled his eyes, twisting his body and catching the spinning blade deftly in his free hand. But just as Kakashi expected, a second was hot on the other's heels, hidden in the other's shadow so perfectly that even he had not seen it. That's Sasuke, for you. Zabuza's eyes went wide, and for the briefest moment Kakashi thought they had won. Nice try. And quote. The assassin brought his legs up to his chest in a standing jump, allowing the deadly weapon to pass directly under him. Game over, Kakashi smirked. Zabuza snarled and turned, but it was too late. Just like when they had taken the bell from Kakashi, the Fuma shuriken burst into a cloud of smoke and Sasuke had emerged from it. 2 kunai were already heading straight for Zabuza's head and back, another fist of shuriken following closely after. He had no choice but to dodge, lest he want his life to end at the hands of a child. With a guttural growl Zabuza tore his arm from the water prison, releasing the technique and allowing the projectiles to pass by him, though not without getting nicked by 1 or 2. He brought the caught shuriken back for a throw, aiming at Sasuke with unmistakable rage in his eyes. You fool! And quote. I don't think so. And quote. Kakashi's voice came low and dangerous, his vice-like grip closing in around Zabuza's wrist. You'd better believe I won't underestimate you again, Sasuke. Even before the call the Uchiha was rushing forward, feet flying across the water with a kunai bared to strike at the enemy. Zabuza glanced back to his clone, but it was dissolving into water after one of the few dozen remaining Narutos got a knife into its side. More were now sprinting towards the river. Suddenly Zabuza's body jerked, going into a brief spasm before he simply started to fall towards the water. Kakashi's head whipped around to a nearby tree, allowing the body to fall limp into the stream. Sasuke stopped short, skidding to a halt and looking wide-eyed at his enemy's neck. 2 long senbone protruded from the back of the man's neck, apparently having killed him instantly. As suddenly as the conflict had begun, it ceased, the thundering of clone footsteps dying down as they realized what had happened. The area was silent for a long moment before a voice spoke from the tree Kakashi was regarding with narrowed eyes. Sorry about that, came the calm voice. A short, androgynous-looking ninja stood on a branch of the tree, face concealed by an Anbu mask with the hidden mist symbol at the forehead. But I couldn't risk him getting away and you had him still for me. And quote. The newcomer inclined his head to Kakashi before continuing. The mist, thanks you for your assistance in taking down one of its most wanted exiles. And quote. You're a hunter nin from the hidden mist, Kakashi said warily, straightening slowly. Why did you wait so long to kill him? And quat. I only just arrived on his trail. I've been tracking his movements for days. I got here just as the water prison broke and was waiting for a clear path, which was only just provided. And quat. Without waiting for approval, the hunter vanished in a swirl of wind and leaves, reappearing beside the fallen man to reach down and feel for a pulse. He is deceased. Would you care to confirm it before I dispose of the body? There was a certain amused, yet cold tone that the young man, or woman, spoke with. Kakashi knelt to feel Zabuza's neck. He's dead. Go ahead. And quat. With a curt nod, the masked ninja leaned down, lifting the much larger man onto one shoulder and turning to regard Kakashi again. Best of luck in your mission. I apologize on behalf of my village for the trouble Zabuza has caused you. And quat. He raised a hand in a seal, and in another swirl of wind was gone. An eerie quiet fell over the scattered group, lasting for a long minute before Kakashi sighed, lowering his hit eye 8 back to its normal position. Status? He asked tiredly as he and Sasuke made their way back to the others, the group of Narutos letting them pass while they looked around cautiously. Kazuna-san is safe, as are Naruto and I, Hinata said shakily, calming down slowly. Sasuke didn't take any damage either. Are you alright, Sensei? And quat. Yes, thanks to you all, he beamed, looking at each of them in turn. I guess I shouldn't be impressed by now that you all can think on your feet, but well done. Dinner's on me when we get back to Konoha. And quat. Hinata almost giggled, and Sasuke even allowed himself a small smirk. I appreciated the sentiment when you challenged Zabuza, Naruto, but next time you don't have to be so dramatic. And quat. To his surprise, Naruto didn't respond immediately, or at all. Naruto? And quat. Kakashi turned in time to see the remaining shadow clones go up on a cloud of smoke, the original falling forward in what seemed like slow motion. He didn't even have time to think about moving before Hinata was at Naruto's side, catching him before he struck the ground. Sasuke was right behind her, kneeling by his friend and looking worried. Naruto? And quat. Hinata breathed, lowering him carefully down and turning him over. His eyes were closed, breathing shallow, and his face was ashen with a cold sweat head breaking on his brow. Naruto! And quat. Thanks for making it to the end. You are incredible. Please let me know your comments and suggestions in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on future uploads. Until next time, see ya.